Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cartridge Club E3 2021 breakdown. Rocket Sauce here. Joining me, we have Dean Rontu Gaming
Hello, hello.
and Caleb J. Ross.
Hi.
Hi. We're here to recap all things E3 so you don't have to or go anywhere else. So before we go into our top 10 from the games we liked and we saw here, we're going to talk about some topics right here. Our overall impressions of the show here. It was a lot of games. Dean, I think at one point told me there was 400 games shown. I can't say I've seen all 400. But that's why I have help here to help me here. Dean, why don't you start off with your overall impressions of the show? Did it meet your expectations?
I think E3 was interesting this year, and I think it was a case of me having my expectations just a little too high. I was thinking, coming off of 2020, we had Ghost of Tsushima, we had Last of Us Part 2, we had Final Fantasy VII Remake, we had Ori, even Cyberpunk was good for the version I played. I picked up my Xbox Series X, I picked up my PS5, and I felt like 2020 was really like ready, set, and 2021 was going to be the go, right? It was going to be balls to the wall, like bring a change of pants. We're just going into the new generation. And I just didn't see that. We're going to talk about some of our highlights here in a little bit. And not one of the highlights that I chose is brought to you by Generation 9, right? There's nothing that the Series X or the PS5 has opened the door to that I saw in the past week. That's getting me super excited. I know there's great stuff in the pipeline. I know, there's a lot of stuff I'm excited about, but I just think the spectacle wasn't there. There weren't a lot of surprises for me. And, anything that I'm really excited about, I'm not really attributing to E3. So not to start on a downer, but I just think it was an interesting E3 this year.
Sure. Caleb, your thoughts? Did it meet your expectations?
I think the phrase the spectacle wasn't there is the perfect way to summarize it. Because I have to imagine, or I have to think that, big AAA development and publishing companies, they build their financial plans around big events where they can promote things to get sales. There's a certain cadence to things. So whether E3 was in person or online or something, there still feels like there has to be an E3 there just from a business perspective. This is me speaking ignorantly, most likely, but it feels like that there has to be something there. And I wonder if that lack of spectacle that we are seeing, I think it has to do with kind of two things. One, the simple idea of it not being in person. Like, even if it was all the same games, same presentations, and it was on stage, there's a ceremony, there's some pomp and circumstance associated with that as a viewer, I can't help but be drawn into. Just seeing people live, react live, hearing the audience like ooh and ah when the trailers are going. Like, even though it's all on one screen from my perspective in my game room down here, when it's live, you feel it and it's live. You just kind of feel it in your bones. So I think that's part of it that made it lack the spectacle. Last year, I think, got a pass because no one really knew what to do and we were all expecting the worst. And so we were just happy that it happened. And so I think that's why you didn't necessarily see too many people be like, there wasn't spectacle there. This year, I think a lot of people are thinking, okay, well, the industry has had a year to prepare. They went through the dry run last year. This year, they're going to bring it. And they brought it in the only way they could. And so, but it ultimately ended up being a little bit of a letdown. So I think just the lack of it being live is probably one of the reasons for that lack of spectacle. The other reason, and I actually think that this is a positive thing, and that's the democratization of the viewer's attention span is such that there's so many games announced that things are going to inevitably be drowned out. And so you're ultimately going to get to a point where everything is sort of diluted. It wouldn't matter how big, like they could have announced Metroid Prime 4, and I don't think that would be a massive, awesome thing if they said Metroid Prime 4 was coming out at the end of this year. People would love it. They'd be talking about it. They think it was great. But I still think we'd be having the conversation. There just wasn't the spectacle. There wasn't something, there just wasn't some magic there. But I think that's good because it allowed it continues to allow us to see all of these smaller games. They get to share screen space with some of these bigger games. And I think that's really good, especially for independent developers and publishers. So I love that idea of it. But it does also mean that there's a lot of presentations here that felt like they were here only because the barrier to entry was low, and they kind of felt like maybe they needed to. Like Capcom's a good example. We'll probably get to specifics, but Capcom didn't need to be there. They didn't announce anything of note. they just didn't need to be there. But I feel like they probably thought, well, everyone else is going to be there. We might as well just talk about something. And so that also kind of diluted things a little bit for me. Because, you know, when companies, if for better and worse, when those companies have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get floor space at these things, they know that they're going to have to perform and shit. They're going to have to justify that spend to their marketing departments or to the people over the marketing departments. They're going to have to justify that spend. Whereas here, you don't feel like they have to justify a spend as much because there's just not as much of a spend. There's positives and negatives to it, but yeah, lack of spectacle, I think, is a great summary.
Do you guys think there was I guess because of the pandemic and everything still being in full effect, that companies are too afraid to, unless they're 100% sure that the game is coming out in the holiday season, too afraid to show all their cards right away? It seems like I know there were games announced for the fall, but it seems like there are some. It seems like there's a lot up in the air. Like it seems like it's a light holiday season for games, and if that's maybe for them just giving their studios more time to develop, because there's been a lot of bad press with crunch for games and broken games coming out, and that stink lasts with you forever. Cyberpunk 2077 still isn't back on PlayStation's network yet. It's still pulled off because they haven't quite fixed it yet. It just seems to me that there wasn't much big game this fall coming out. It's just a lot of, seems like summer releases, summer, and maybe because there's just more shows now. The Game Awards, they have to have announcements, right? And like I said, there's a lot of games announced. It just seems like the hype games that would be like the draw for the holiday season weren't there. So that's one thing I would say I would take away from this here, out of all of them. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. I know one thing we'll talk about is, where do we think 2021's Game of the Year will be? We'll get to that. But it just seems like those games right now, we'll get there. We'll talk about 2021 Game of the Years here. Anyways, I know I'm getting a little off topic, but it's the only thing I would say that I felt like I noticed this year for these games, that the heavy hitters that you expected would be for the holiday season, that'd be really trying to fight for your dollar, weren't announced. And it feels like they're still to be announced. And I know there's Gamescom and Tokyo Game Show still to come out. I don't know.
Game Awards toward the end of the year, sometimes they'll do some pretty cool surprise drops then.
So it just seems like maybe because there's more that they can spread out, where they can say, okay, well, we're not quite sure if this is going to be ready by the fall. Maybe it might be fall. Maybe it'll be January or February, that quarter one. Maybe that's why they're holding off, because they don't want to show their cards too quick. I think maybe PlayStation not being there is a prime example of that. Because 2 weeks ago they announced for Horizon 2. Well, they didn't announce it, but they said they're aiming for the fall or holiday season. So I know that's probably going to be their end of the year holiday season, but usually they would do their thing with maybe get a Capcom, like a Resident Evil announcement, and here and there. I don't know. It just seems like the lack, I don't want to say just the lack of PlayStation, but it seems like everyone was too afraid to show all their hands. That's the one thing I would say they're giving us something to say, here's something, but it seems like everyone's too afraid to show their cards. And I don't know if the prime example, the best E3 of all time is 2015, right, Dean?
Yeah, that's right.
Where we got Final Fantasy VII Remake announced, which is a game everyone has been asking for the longest damn time. Shenmue 3, big announcement. It was just like unbelievable, where it was so heavy you could not even process the next game that was coming out. But then we had to wait 5 years for these games to come out. where it's like, then every year going forward, you ask yourself, okay, where's the game? Gotta give me another trailer. Gotta give me another trailer, and they skip it. Prime example this year would be Beyond Good and Evil 2 from Ubisoft. Has it been 3 years since we saw a trailer? You know, what's the state? I think they've had to do a change of director.
Management.
Yeah. So it's Metroid Prime 4 announced, but they had to do a change of developer, and maybe they're too afraid that they know it's in the works. Stuff comes up and throws a curveball at them. Where I don't know. It just seems like maybe they're just too afraid to show their cards because we've got these new consoles now, still very hard to get, but it seems like maybe they're just too afraid to get people on them asking where all these titles are. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the gaming landscape, though, is changing so much so quickly that I don't think the companies know what to do. Right? We have Sony, every other week sort of pivoting on their initial plans and sort of falling back on supporting the PS4 or working further on their PlayStation Now to try and compete with Game Pass. You have the crunch thing where, Cyberpunk 2077 prime example of that, where they don't want to release games. They don't want the pressure to release games early in fear of just losing all credibility. We just have like a really dynamic point in gaming right now where nobody really knows what the consumer wants. I don't think the consumer knows what they want. And people are just maybe putting words in these companies' mouths, but I think they're worried. I think they want to get a firmer grasp, on, manufacturing. When can we get back, with these semiconductor shortages? Like when can we get back on track with supply and demand? What do the gamers want and when do they want it? When are our competitors going to be releasing their tentpole games and how do we compete with that? And is, the holiday season really the season to be targeting? Is that the be all end all time frame, or can we play this a little looser now? And things like E3, while they're great to really try to push viewership, I'm almost wondering, is the future going to be better if we try to split out, some of these big budget AAA titles from the indies so that nothing gets drowned out, right? Because an E3 with 400 games, that's a lot of games. And, at some point you're waiting for something to wow you because you've just had sort of these micro satisfactions. Oh, that game looks cool, but it's gone in 30 seconds. Oh, that game looks cool, but it's, it just gets buried, and you're waiting for something to just really leave you with that lasting impression. And it's hard when there's such a saturation of what all of these companies are showing. Like Caleb said, some of these shows are 40 minutes long and they're showcasing just one game, whereas others are 30 minutes long and it's 100 game, bam, 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 bam. And it's just really hard to, try to justify that that's a good way to showcase what's coming up.
Yeah, I think I think there's definitely some logic to that's not the best way to showcase these games. On the other end of those, let's just kind of pick some numbers here that I'm making up. So we have 400 for this year, the games that release. Let's say, and it's traditional E3, you might get 50 games. I don't know if the disparity is quite that big, but just for thought experiment, there's still an increasingly a constant increasing number of games being developed. So whether we show 50 at E3 or we show 400, the number of games that exist out there are the same. And so I'm wondering if by showing 50, is it really letting things shine, or is it that we have fewer things to decide what is shining and what's not? If we have fewer options, we're going to pick the one that looks the prettiest to be like, that was the showstopper. But if we have 400, even if we can't keep up with them, I prefer 400 because I'm going to see things that I would not have seen otherwise. And some of the games that were announced weren't really announced. They were just sort of updates on games that were announced a long time ago. One of the games I'll talk about actually was, I think, announced in 2019 E3. And so they're just sort of coming to fruition. They're talking about them again. So in terms of new announcements, there probably wasn't quite 400, but it's a matter of, am I going to see 2 seconds of this game, or am I going to probably never see this game ever before? And I think even 2 seconds is enough for it's not enough for me to make a decision on the game, but it's more than some of those independent developers especially would be given otherwise. I also think that the E3 model, the way it is right now, with so many different platforms or so many different presentations, I think of it almost like a channel model, where it's like there's certain ones that I'm just not going to watch because I just know they're not going to be anything that I care about. Like the PC gamer one, I'm not a PC gamer. I don't care. I'm just not going to watch it. So I just tune out, right? But there's going to be certain other ones like Xbox, obviously, I wanted to watch, and on some of the bigger ones. If each publisher had their own thing, Devolver Digital is a good example of this. Like, I'm going to watch their show. I'm going to every year, no matter what, because I just love the games they put out. I love what they do. And so I sort of pick and choose my channels rather than try to absorb everything, because I know it's a failed, it's not going to be possible. So if I had to choose between the two, I like the spectacle of like, I'm one of the apologists for Sony's I think it was 2019 maybe, or
just showed 4 games.
Yeah, I'm actually an apologist for that. I thought that was really cool. Like, I thought it was kind of cool just to highlight 4 games, go really in depth, set a mood, because Sony's the storytelling studio, and you set a mood, you're sort of evoking the sense of a story, of a narrative that people are gathered around. They're experiencing this intimate thing together through music. And I was an apologist for it. I thought it was really cool. 4 games, I'm fine with that, because they were deep dives and they were just really good games, polished games. So I do like that. But when it comes to indies competing, the only way we can do it right now is to segregate into channels and stuff those channels as much as possible, and just follow the developers or publishers that you like. In my thinking.
So, did you I guess like this year's format better than last year, where it was more spaced out throughout the whole summer?
I like this better. I don't like having to set aside time multiple times throughout the month. I much prefer a week. Give it all to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and for some reason last year everything was on a Thursday, which is like the worst day to ever possibly do it. The worst. So, and Jeff Keighley didn't learn this year, because he was going to do Summer Game Fest on a Thursday. So, strike against it, Jeff, or gee off. But yeah, it was, they kind of tried almost a little bit. And by that, I mean, Horizon was 2 weeks ago. I kind of wish Sony would have just dumped that on one of the shows. Like, they could have done it on Summer Game Fest or something. It just seems like I get it. They didn't want to be lost in the news. They wanted to have the day to be theirs. But I kind of wish they would have jumped in. I think that it would have been a highlight of E3 for me.
Yeah, but I think that's also because you're a Sony fanboy, and I am too. So I'm not. Yeah, so I think that's probably why it would have been a highlight, because I think. If I had to put my feet in Sony's shoes, there's probably a couple things going on. One, they'll probably wait until the E3 hubbub calms down, and they'll do like a state of play or something. They'll do like state of play, talk about some games, updates to games, that sort of thing, and just sort of carry on business as usual. I also think that they knew that with the Bethesda acquisition, they were going to be compared to what Bethesda and Microsoft are offering. Like, without a doubt, whatever PlayStation did, people were going to compare it to Microsoft, and they're going to say who won this, who won that. And PlayStation probably knew they really couldn't compete with something like a Bethesda acquisition talking about the games that were coming out. Even though me personally was a little disappointed by the Xbox stuff, because I don't have investment in a lot of those things. I think they would have to say, okay, well, they're going to talk about their $7.5 billion acquisition. They're going to talk about games. People are going to talk about it. What do we have to show other than we're still working on Horizon, we're working on God of War, maybe a couple other things? Like, it would have, when you compare them side by side, it probably would have faltered for anybody other than Sony fanboys like us. And maybe they just kind of were like, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth it to throw something together. It's not worth it. We don't have stuff to talk about. Let's just do our own state of play a month later and pretend, it didn't happen. Or they'll just go to Tokyo Game Show, which I think they usually have a larger presence there than Microsoft, although Microsoft might be wanting to get a presence there since they're really pushing hard to the Japanese market. And it seems to be working for them, so that maybe there will be a showdown there in Tokyo.
Huh. We prefer to be called Playboys, Caleb, so
I will never do that.
No, that's it's either you're a Playboy or you're not a fanboy, Yeah, what's it called? Dean, your thoughts spread out?
Yeah, it's Dean. You got it right.
You know, if you were to ask me last year, I would say spread the shit out, spread it across a couple months, and just give me a constant drip of new games. 5 new games a day over the course of the summer. I was so exhausted by July, like I was just done, and it kept going. It kept going till like October, right? Like there was just new stuff. And granted, last year was a hell of a year for gaming. Like there was a lot of hype behind a lot of things. There was new consoles. There were a ton of AAA titles. The Game Awards were like, who's going to win? There was some suspense behind it. This year, I don't think we'll get anything like that. I think there's going to be, a small handful of titles that will obviously win some genre-specific awards. But I think overall, sort of concatenating it into the same number of shows just in a shorter time frame is better for me anyway.
Cool. What's it called? So yeah, there were some heavy hitters shown at this show here, but let's start off with Microsoft right here, because do you think they redeemed themselves with Halo Infinite? Because it was kind of a joke when it was shown off last year with Craig. Craig became a meme. And we talked about it during the live viewing of Xbox, that like he's got to be in the game now. You cannot take him out. He's too good of a joke. He's like a mascot. He's like as much of a mascot as Master Chief is when it comes to Halo for me now. But do you think they corrected what they saw? I know they brought the guy from Bungie on to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll admit, like the last showcase, I guess I didn't really catch on as quickly as everybody else did on how bad it really looked. To me, it didn't look that bad of a game. I wasn't used to what next generation offers. I'm still not. I don't see a whole lot of difference between 8th gen and 9th gen, but I didn't really see it as a bad game. This year, they really focused on multiplayer, which I have very little interest in. So redemption-wise, it didn't really change my perspective on the game. I'll still play the campaign. But I know for other people just looking on social media that a lot of them really bought into whatever they showcased this year. They were sold on it. So good on Microsoft for making the call to hold off until Q4.
It seems like, well, it's they're aiming still for this holiday year. That's their goal. It still seems to me, and I know I mentioned it here. I mentioned on the Xbox show. It seems like with the title Infinite, that it's probably more likely to be a shorter campaign, but an abundance of campaigns coming out down the road for it. And I mean, to me, it makes sense to do it that way if you're going to do it. That way, you can give yourself more and more time to pace out the game, especially if it's going to be a service, because the multiplayer is free to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they announced. They said that, and then it's going to be mostly on Game Pass. So they're going to be trying to sell Game Pass by here's the next season, here's the next chapter 2 of whatever. Maybe they'll do episodically, like a Telltale game. Need a little bit more information on that, but it was probably a better display of what they showed. So.
Quick interruption, Ryan. Am I pinned? Because I'm looking at the YouTube feed and all I see is my face, which is glorious. I love it. But I don't know.
I don't think so. Let me check myself here.
Oh, wait, I'm just an egomaniac. All I see is my face.
Oh.
Yeah, that's really weird. I don't know why it's doing that for me. Oh, nope, there we go. I was scrolled down, so all I saw was my face at the bottom. Oh, I'm a dummy. Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That was a highlight of the show.
As Blink comments, listening to smart people while I make taco salad.
Oh, hey, why aren't you listening to us, Blink? Come on. God, meanie.
Joel gave us a heads up saying you're good. You can see
cool. I'm an idiot. Thanks,
Ask
Joel,
the chat.
for rubbing
Ask
that in my
the
face.
chat here. Hey, chat. How do I look here?
For me, I don't think that Xbox needed redeeming necessarily, just because I'm not target demographic for Halo. But the fans seem to really love what they saw this time. They love and I'm speaking definitely in vast, generalities, but the Halo fandom seems to really like multiplayer. That seems to be a focus for them, and this looked really fun to them. It's not my thing again, but it looked really, really fun to them. I do remember seeing I remember being unimpressed by the visuals of the first one, only because there was extremely, and this is just me being a nerd, there was extremely noticeable pop-up in the skyboxes and the backgrounds of that clip that was shown last year at E3. And while I thought the rest of the graphic stuff looked fine, the gameplay and everything looked fine, I'm like, that shouldn't happen. That much pop-up should not be happening when you have an SSD running in your system. And so I knew something was off and a little weird, but I was also not willing to vocalize that on Twitter because I want Halo fans to be Halo fans and I want them to love this new thing. If they came out with like a new What Remains of Edith Finch and all that was online were people talking about how, stupid the textures looked, I'd be like, shut up. Let me have this, guys. So I think they redeemed themselves in the sense that they gave the fans something they wanted. They gave the fans something that looked really, really cool. I think it was smart that they didn't address the campaign or didn't talk about the campaign at all, because they kind of already did that. It's probably still baking. If they did show campaign stuff, it would be an obvious ploy to say, hey, forget about that old stuff. And I don't think they necessarily care about people forgetting about the old stuff. They've apologized for it. They said, yeah, we've already kicked it back, so there's no need to apologize. It's like, we've decided this isn't good. We want to kick it back. They'd have to apologize if they released it in that state, but they didn't. So they don't need to apologize. They focus on multiplayer. Multiplayer probably be released earlier than the campaign, I'm guessing, and fans will love that. So I'm really happy for Halo fans, and I think the Xbox presentation was really strong. And it was smart that they put Halo in the middle and not at the end, because then that's all people would have been talking about, and they needed to really showcase that they're a company that can make exclusives, and they have the capacity to make exclusives. Not any are released yet, obviously, but like they have the capacity to make exclusives. They'll do it. And I think they sent that message was loud and clear. So I think they did a really, really good job. I think that was a strong presentation.
What about another heavy hitter? One from Ubisoft, Far Cry 6. Is that on anyone's radar? No? Not for you, Caleb?
For me, yeah.
You're wrong. You're wrong, too.
I've never played a Far Cry game. And I don't know. Something about this one just is sucking me in for the campaign anyway.
Is it because of what do you call it?
Giancarlo Esposito?
Oh, so say Moff Gideon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they got the actor, right? They got the draw. You know what? I'll say one thing that stood out more to me than Far Cry 6, and it's because I really haven't ever dove into a Far Cry game, and it's kind of like Assassin's Creed at this point. When you start flooding me right here, and I start falling behind, I start to pull away from your franchise here. Mm-hmm. That's probably the pullback from Far Cry 6 for me at the moment. And I have, I think 3, 4, 5. I just have not ever played them yet. So that's on me. In my mountain of
you
games.
Bought them. They don't care. They don't care if you play them.
Didn't buy them at full price, so sorry, Ubisoft. I bought it at the nice 20 below price. But one thing, it's not on my list here of games that stood out, but it did catch my eye was the Avatar game. I'm curious what kind of game it is, because it was mostly a CG trailer. I don't know. I saw the part where you're the cat people and you're riding on the birds. So I don't know if that's like a Star Fox level. Is it open world?
I think it's going to be a giant multiplayer games as a service thing, like every game at E3 this year seemed to be. Like that's my biggest takeaway from E3 is this was the first time that every trailer I went into it, not even questioning whether or not this was a single player campaign. Every single time I just knew it was, or I'm sorry, not questioning whether or not it was multiplayer or had multiplayer or what was the focus. I went into every reveal going, like, just assuming it's a multiplayer game. So I instead was looking for which one's the single player? Which one's the single player? Like I was fishing for that instead of avoiding multiplayer. I was fishing for single player. And that's a dramatic change from previous E3s. And that's a dramatic shift in the industry. Eventually, if I want to continue loving video games, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and do multiplayer stuff. But I can also rest assured, though, that even if they stop making video games now, there's so many video games that have been made that I'll never play them all. So that's always good, looking at the bright side of things, I guess. But it was just a weird mentality shift that was almost imperceptible because I wasn't consciously doing it. It wasn't until halfway through that I kind of just realized I'm not even looking for whether or not this is multiplayer. They are. And anyway, it was a strange thing for me.
That is spot on, Caleb. I didn't put those together at all, and that may be why I'm so lukewarm to this E3, is that I really felt like I wasn't the audience for it. I feel like I'm no longer in the
you guys are getting old. You guys are getting old. Changing the times here. That's a great point, because I didn't just think of that until just now. So great point, Caleb.
Speaking of great points.
Yeah, speaking of multiplayer, what about Battlefield 2042? It's a no for everybody.
I've never played
It'll be a huge success. And I imagine Battlefield fans will be happy, but they'll still get undersold by Call of Duty, whatever, Warzone, this one, whatever. No Call of Duty this year? That seems weird, but maybe just going to keep living in Warzone, live on as a service? Who knows?
It's weird that I haven't ever...
Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
They announced some Warzone and Black Ops DLC that looked Season 4, whatever it was. So I think that was their cameo. But
it's weird to me that I haven't gotten into the campaigns of those various games, Battlefields and your Call of Duties and everything, because you can find them super cheap in every store. I love first-person single-player campaigns. I've heard nothing but great things about those. I've heard they're usually pretty short. Like, if I were smart, I would go to eBay and just buy a stack of old Call of Duty games with single-player campaigns for $20 for 50 of them and just have a good time. But I just don't. And the fact that this one is a multiplayer only, it feels like that they've always been that, because I've just always associated that franchise with multiplayer. But one of these days I should probably go back. Maybe that's a question for the comments. If there's anybody who has played a Battlefield game or a Call of Duty game, like, is there a great entry point for single player campaign lovers to get into that series?
Black Ops, the first one, I would say, for campaign.
I said comments. I didn't say smart Alec Hope.
Right, hold on 1 second here. COD.
I love
Black Ops. Okay, now check the chat.
You bastard.
But it's called. Yeah, there are a few. There are a few that to me were. If you're asking me, I kind of fell off because it seems like, to quote my buddy Mike, it got to a point with Call of Duty where they added so many new unique attack things that my old brain can't. I'm like, why am I sliding now? Why do I, jetpack hovering? I don't want to do this. I just like running around as fast as I can and point and shoot, and get me to the story point and shoot. Even the online play wasn't bad because they give you the RPG elements. You leveled up, you get this new perk, you can run faster now, stuff like that. Where I'm like, oh, okay, it draw you in. And I played for about a month and then I was done. But it was also at that point too. It also helped that PlayStation's online network was free, so which also was fine. But I don't know. How about this for an E3 question? Was there anything that you're hoping to see that didn't make it so far? Dean, nod your head. What about you?
Again, probably unfair expectations. I was really hoping for some more details on Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. They had a May 7th sort of online reveal where they showcased a lot of the Intergrade Intermission, which is a new DLC, a lot of that content. And Nomura wanted to showcase more of Part 2, but the marketing team sort of held him back, saying, we're going to wait for the next event. I was thinking the next event might be E3, probably Tokyo Game Show or some other Square spinoff somewhere along the summer, but I was really hoping to see more. Final Fantasy 16, really hoping to see some more of that as well. That didn't happen. God of War Ragnarok, I know Sony wasn't there, but I just wanted them to just drop it during Xbox's show. Just fuck it. Let's.
That would have been that would have been harsh, man. Like right in the middle of the stream. Oh.
Yeah. Some next gen stuff like Unreal 5 engine, even just like more tech demos. I don't care. I just
Mhm.
want to get excited for this generation. And I just found myself picking games that were not. And then of course the Nintendo stuff, right? Bayonetta 3, Metroid Prime 4. Would love to see that stuff, but kind of knew it wasn't going to happen.
Before we go on real quick, I just want to say also Blink agrees with me. He says Black Ops. But he also follows it up with, I've never played it, but I still say it. So thank you, Blink. What's
Wow.
it called?
A lot of passionate players in this chat. That's great.
I'll say Bayonetta 3. I thought for sure it was going to be at least a trailer. Not saying this year, but what we got when it was announced was just like a silhouette of Bayonetta. That was it. You know, and the gun bullets going on. I thought we would at least got a trailer. I was hoping, I didn't think we were going to get Breath of the Wild 2. We got that. And granted, we got just to see little hints of it, but I was expecting something else from Nintendo. I was hoping whatever their holiday game was going to be announced, and granted, we did get one. We did get one in Metroid, but I just felt like I don't know. I know.
I feel like they don't need the holiday game. You know, their fiscal ends in March. March is when they release the Switch, and the Switch has been pretty much the most successful system they've ever released. Breath of the Wild was part of that, even though Breath of the Wild was also on the previous gen set. Like, it was such a phenomenal launch for them that I would be surprised if they tried to release some sort of big holiday game that would compete with people who eventually want to buy a Switch Pro and Breath of the Wild in March. Like, I'm guessing those are probably both going to be released in March of 2022. And they still own that space at that time of the year. People thought it was crazy that they would release the Switch and Zelda and Mario in March, but they did, and it's been phenomenally successful for them. So I think they'll just repeat that, is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, one game that I thought for sure was going to get announced, or my hopes were at the most for this one, was Marvel vs. DC by Neversoft. I thought for sure. I blame this on Ed Boon. Keep teasing it, because he keeps teasing it. He did it twice this last month, or maybe the previous month. I thought for sure. So Warner Brothers said they were going to be there, and then all they really did was show Back for Blood. That was the disappointment, because I thought Warner Brothers having a show, I think it was supposed to be following Xbox later in the day after Square. I was like, that's when they're going to do it. Nope. that would have been a hype train game, but maybe it's not happening. Maybe it is, but it's so far away. I just thought for sure that was going to be the big game that was going to be shown this year. Kind of like I said it on Frantic Thoughts that I thought Sony was going to at least do a state of play drop, basically. Not like during whatever this Thursday to Tuesday period that was going on. I thought for sure they're going to do it, but then they kind of just announced, Horizon, and I was like, don't tell me you're going this early, So I thought we were going to at least get something to get in the hype, but I don't know. Maybe you're right, probably, Caleb, about, letting your competition go, and then another day closer to Tokyo Game Show, you can do another state of play, saying, hey, here's a couple more games or something you expect for the fall. Because right now, our consoles are impossible to get, so...
Yeah, it could also be, it could be a mix of a few things. Dean, you mentioned you wish you would have seen more tech demos. And then I'm thinking, and I don't want to chalk everything up to COVID, but it's definitely had a big impact on things. And I'm thinking in terms of, if this were a traditional E3 and COVID wasn't a thing and there was a new console generation, we would absolutely be seeing release dates and demos for games for recent released consoles that are really hyping up their core feature set. So that tells me that, like, developers have been working on this kind of stuff before COVID happened. So they have assets created, they have things to showcase next gen features in some of their games. Maybe it's that they legitimately don't want to show that stuff because of the inability for people to get systems. So why hype up something that no one can buy? that no one can, like E3 is after all a way to sell games. Like if no one can buy it, why hype it up? So they probably have those things. They're sitting on them. They're just not going to show them because it wouldn't make sense. And then that would explain why maybe we've seen Ragnarok, or I guess we haven't seen Ragnarok. We've seen Horizon 2, because that is a game that's cross-generational. So they feel like they can go ahead and showcase that because they do want to sell the PlayStation 4 for people. But the rest of the games we haven't seen are probably games that are next-gen exclusives. And so that's probably why we haven't seen them. And it's probably as simple as that, honestly, which is exciting because that does mean that when the chip shortages stop happening, hopefully right when that production of the PlayStation 5s and Xbox Series consoles start ramping up, we'll just get a glut of amazing trailers and stuff, because now people can actually get invested in those games and start thinking about them, start planning for them. Whereas right now it would just fall on deaf ears, maybe.
So with that being said, we did find some games we really did enjoy, or we really picked here. So we each picked about 10 here, and we're going to show some trailers here, and we'll all talk about the games that really stood out to us here. I'm going to start off with one of mine right here. And actually, it was a game that I played last gen, but it's getting a PlayStation 5 port. And it is the Death Stranding Director's Cut. Did they say it was coming to other consoles besides PlayStation, or is it just because it says it was captured on PlayStation 5?
I think PC, right?
In PC. And it was a PlayStation exclusive, but I know there's been some teases of Xbox here. I like this trailer a lot. Felt very Metal Gear, like got me excited here with this top down and the little bit of the box humor here. I love Death Stranding a lot, and I've been clamoring to play this game again. Am I gonna probably double down and buy this game? Double dose? Probably. It's gonna be the I guess when it releases kind of thing. If it's been like a while since I bought a game, will I buy a new? If it goes up against a bunch of other games that are new that I really want to get, it might get pushed aside because like I've already beaten it. I just know I've been clamoring to play this game again. I loved it. I think a lot of people bought into the joke about just being a delivery service person and never playing the game. I loved it. It was my game of the year. I'm trying to think when it came out 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
yeah.
2019.
It was my game of the year that year. And I know I heard it's got more missions in it. This definitely looks like a mission that was never in the game. But I don't know. I've been clamoring to play it. The soundtrack's fantastic. I love the gameplay. Yeah, it's a great game. I can't praise it more enough. Maybe I'll force everyone to play it while making it a club game because I love it that much. But no, it's a great game. I'm a Kojima fan. I'm excited to see what else he's got coming up next. That was a disappointment. I want to know what Kojima's playing next, and I know he's gonna hold that close to his chest. But releasing this for PlayStation 5, I know it's getting. I don't know if it's gonna be just like an extra $10 fee or whatever, like for an upgrade service, or if they're just gonna charge again, pull a Nintendo and just charge again, Funky Kong mode. But yeah, that one is the first one I was gonna talk about because it was on Summer Game Fest. It stood out to me right away. So.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Death Stranding. I thought it was a fantastic game. It was my game of the year as well that year. This trailer in particular, though, I'm not the type of person to go back and play DLC or expanded editions of any game. So I probably won't, no matter, even though I loved this game to death. What was interesting about this trailer is there's the speculation that it's basically Kojima saying that he's never going to make another Metal Gear Solid game, so stop talking about it. Oranges in cinema are a sign of death. So they're just kind of representation of death in cinema. And so having a box full of oranges tells me he's killing it. Like, don't talk about it anymore. Although Kojima is crazy man, so maybe he's just being weird. But what I do like about it though is that I remember when I was playing Death Stranding, one of my earliest thoughts was, well, I guess when I kind of realized in the game that you're never actually going to go below ground to see the underground cities, I thought, well, that's Death Stranding 2. you're going to go in the underground cities. Like that's the natural progression. That's the natural place to go. And it looks like maybe this director cut does kind of touch in there. This was obviously a mule base. It wasn't actually an underground city, but it was definitely underground. And so I wonder if they're going to allow you to sort of get underground and that kind of stuff. That would be actually pretty cool. So it'll definitely be one that I watch a playthrough of, but yeah, I don't know if I'll go back and play it again.
I wonder if it's almost like Metal Gear Solid 5. Like in Metal Gear Solid 5 was a game that wasn't finished. That's the biggest gripe about Metal Gear Solid 5. It had potential to be the best Metal Gear. The problem is there's more missions that were left off because Konami's like, you spent way too much money making this game. Just get this game out here. And there is, like, you can look up the final missions that were there. They're there in the game. I think they're on the disc. They're just not built. They're like the cinema is there for the game. It's just the gameplay isn't there. Like he needed more time to make it, and they had the big fight with them, and whatever. They just pushed it out. They removed his name from I think the credits in the beginning of the game. It's the ugly split. And maybe that's what this one was. Is that this was I believe announced right when the PlayStation 4 was announced, and like that first year, and then he spent 5 years building it, and they got it out because it came out right before a holiday season. That maybe he's just like, this is mostly done, but there's just more stuff that I was working on. And so he's like, well, we got PlayStation 5 coming out in a couple of years. Let's put it out again, So who knows? But I'm going to play it again just because I know I had such a great time with it. I want to platinum the game. I wanted to platinum it, go back and play it now, but now you're giving me another excuse to hold off and play on my PlayStation 5. So, but enough of Death Stranding talk, Director Scott. Let's talk about something new here. And Dean, there was a Metal Slug game that you want to talk about here. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, Metal Slug Tactics. And that was part of Jeff Keighley's Summer of Games Fest kickoff. I'm not a Metal Slug fan, not because I don't like the games, just I haven't played a lot of them. I don't know much about the lore or haven't really played more than maybe a small handful. But I think with .emu or .emu behind it, I mean, they're killing it lately with Streets of Rage 4. They did Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap. They're doing the new TMNT game. So I think this is like right in their wheelhouse, and this marriage of IP and genre, I think just really, really works. I was really looking for the next Advance Wars game, and we'll talk about that later on in this show. But this obviously showcased first, and it's not often that we see, a turn-based strategy game with a pixelated aesthetic. I think as exhausted as the pixelated action platformer genre is these days, with so many indies coming out, I think they've sort of steered clear from the turn-based strategy. At least that I've seen anyway. I haven't seen a whole lot of games like this. So they mentioned that there's some roguelite elements to this, and that's got me really curious because roguelite, you're obviously gaining something in lieu of dying. You're not losing all of your progress, right? So whether that means you play part of a mission and you get to keep your experience, or you get to keep the skills or the items you found, that's really cool. Where I get worried is that if rogue is synonymous with randomization, what I love about turn-based strategy games is the trial and error. Mm-hmm. Like there's no good turn-based strategy game that you can jump to, the last half of the game and beat the stage first try. It's all about where do I need to deploy my guys? Where do they need to go? What's weak against what? What's the most effective route to, the success state of the mission? And if they throw randomization into that, it takes away a lot of the fun, right? Because then it's not about trial and error. It's just about getting lucky with enemy placement or terrain or whatever the case. So I like the idea of roguelite where you're not losing everything. You get to gain a little bit every time you try. But if it means random generation of maps or NPC placement, I get really worried.
I didn't realize it was .emu until you just pointed that out. It makes sense with the art. But yeah, next on to you, Caleb. How do you pronounce this game?
Vocabulantis.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about
It sounds like an educational game to teach you vocabulary and grammar and things like that. So if I spoke Swedish, I think that's what they are, the development team, I'd probably know what that originates from. But so Vocabulantis, it's a basically a puzzle platformer using stop motion stop motion animation, and it can be done co-op or it can be done single player. It really struck my attention. A good art style is always going to just grab my attention. The fact that it's a puzzle platformer just speaks my language. I love puzzle platformers. I love really good looking puzzle platformers. This one looks absolutely incredible. But what I really like about it is the use of stop motion animation. The developer behind her, one of the people on the team, his name is Morten Sodengaard. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He was influenced by this game called The Neverhood, which was released back in 1996, I think, and it's a PC point-and-click adventure game, but it's essentially claymation, but it was limited in that a lot of the animations were scripted and things like this, and he wanted a really like sort of freedom of movement, at least on a 2D plane, but freedom of movement, player control, 3D or stop motion animation game, and that's what he's created here. And he's used not only just like the stop motion dolls that he's like taken pictures of to make it work, but and actually you'll see it right here in this clip. It's really kind of interesting. What he's done is he poses for every single pose of the doll. He takes like 30 or 40 pictures with different lights, so that in the game you can actually have real life light effects be affecting this doll. So it gives it a really cool 3D effect that really you can't get with 2D, or you've never really been able to get previously with stop motion video games. So it's really cool. I love the idea of taking real world assets and modeling them, and like actually using their hands to build these assets, build these models, and then actually put them into the game. It's really cool. The first time I personally experienced it was with a game called The Swapper, which was a 2D puzzle platformed game. According to my list of completed video games, it's my 44th favorite video game of all time, The Swapper, right behind Psychonauts and right in front of Thomas Was Alone. So that tells you a little bit about the kind of games I like. So I love The Swapper, and The Swapper used real world assets, but it wasn't overt about it like it is in this game. You look at this game and it's obvious it's stop motion animation, but in The Swapper you kind of had to pay attention, and you would notice paper plates in the background that were just made to look like UFOs. And in the world of The Swapper, those are supposed to be UFOs. Like, you're not supposed to know they're paper plates, but it's just created in such a way they're like, wait a second, is that a tin can? I'm pretty sure they used a tin can for that asset. And so it's just kind of cool. I love that idea of taking the real and the intangible sort of multimedia and just melding them together. I'm super excited about this game. Yeah, I love it. I love the idea.
That was a very interesting idea.
Yeah. And there was another one that was released, another one that was talked about, Harold Halibut, that was also shown during E3. That's also a stop motion 3D animation game. So if this becomes a trend, I'm all for it.
Very interesting. Yeah, I missed this one, so it's very good find here, Caleb. Good find here. Now I'm just waiting for this ad to end here. I'm hiding the magic here. But yeah, so this next one for me was also shown on Summer Game Fest. I'm a huge fan of this movie franchise, and not the biggest multiplayer fan at all. But what kind of changed my attitude to the style of gameplay has been Predator Hunting Grounds for the PlayStation 4. I picked that game up for $10 last year on either Black Friday. I think it was a Black Friday sale for $10. Maybe it was even $8. And I was playing it with Old S Retro Gamer, Church, Jason Corpsload Gaming, Captain Algebra. We were just playing, my buddy Tony. We just all picked up this game, and we had a great time playing Predator Hunting Ground. Just playing with a bunch of guys online. But there's another movie franchise that I love, but this one I'm talking about is a franchise. One of my favorite horror film franchises ever. It's Evil Dead. And the thing about it is, so you got characters from Ash vs. Evil Dead in there. You got characters from Army of Darkness that are in this game that you can play as. the thing is, either I want to play as Ash or I don't play as anyone else. Because Ash is the coolest. I watching this game right here, and they said, "Oh, you can play as the Deadites." And I'm like, I don't really want to play as the Deadites. If I'm going to play as one of the things like on Friday the 13th, you can play as Jason. That's the thing everyone wants to play as that, or they want to play as Predator. But if I'm going to play as the bad guy, I'm trying to kill the whole gang. I want to play as Evil Ash from Army of Darkness. And lo and behold, they end the trailer that Evil Ash is in the game. So, Top is asking, play any of the previous Evil Dead games? Yes, I have. I played Evil Dead Regeneration. I beat that one. I posted my just beat it on Twitter, and I tagged Bruce Campbell, who plays Ash, and he made fun of me. So, because I waited 10 years, I guess, to beat the game. That was his joke at it. So I have that picture saved. If I ever meet Bruce Campbell, I will have him sign his insult to me on Twitter because Ash made fun of me, so it's totally worth it. Yeah, I if I didn't play Predator before, this game probably would have been so like lukewarm on the radar for me. But since I enjoy Predator so much, this is definitely my wheelhouse. I want to play this with friends. I know it's probably be hard to get people, especially if it's like a $60 launch. I know Predators was $40 game, so if it's in that wheelhouse, I'd probably jump on it right away. It's just it's a fun probably combat game. It seems like the Deadites here seem to be like the NPCs for what Predator are, where you have missions and you have to take out whatever commandos and whatnot to clear an area, and then you have to watch out for probably like the big Deadites or Evil Ash coming after you. But definitely in my wheelhouse because I love the franchise, and the musical is great. Go see the musical if you haven't seen the musical. Here's Evil Ash. But yeah, Ash vs. Evil Dead's a great show. I've also will say I played the Dreamcast game, and I believe Fistful of Boomsticks. Didn't get very far in them because they're very hard to control games, but more Evil Dead is always great. So coming in 2021. So imagine later this year. So yeah, that was my one here. As I move on to the next game, Dean, why don't you tell me about the next game on this list here that is on your wheelhouse here?
Yeah, this is Kena, Bridge of Spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like we've seen this game before at previous events, but it really took I don't want to say center stage, but it showed up in a couple different shows during E3 here, and the game is just gorgeous. Like if you look at this, it's from a pretty small team. Was it Ember Lab? I want to say it's about 10 people anyway, but they have a history in animated films and ads. They did the Majora's Mask fan film, so it's a super talented team. Yeah. But I think that just makes me love this game even more. It's that it looks so damn good, and it's just a small team that did it. So you play as the spirit guide, Kena, and right away, absolutely love her personality. Right, she's smiling, she's soft spoken, she's spiritual. I think that anytime you have a game where you're trouncing through the woods or battling environmental hazards, the protagonist just has a tendency to, just be macho and gruff or witty and sarcastic, or just have those traits that, have evolved from being stuck in the wilderness. But, when you think of God of War or Horizon Zero Dawn or, Last of Us to some extent, Tomb Raider, all of the protagonists are just, just ruggedly badass. And she just has this sort of aura of innocence to her. She looks like she's really trying to help as opposed to survive, and that sort of sucked me in. I think that's what sucked me into Ghost of Tsushima last year with Jin Sakai. Right, he could have just as easily been just some grunty badass, and instead he was just very calm. He oneness with his environment. He would take breaks and do haikus, and I just loved him as a character. And I think she is a nice representation of that in a very different style of game. I think gameplay wise, this looks really cool, right? Your goal is essentially to clean the land of all the corruption around this village. That is your duty, and to do that, you collect these little characters called rot, which are plucked right out of like a Studio Ghibli design book. They're just way too adorable. But it's cool because they have different abilities. They're used in combat. They're used to solve puzzles. You can personalize them with different masks, sort of like the Koroks in Breath of the Wild. The combat is a bit hack and slashy, but you have this like courage meter that fills up, and once you're at full courage, then your rot will fight for you, and you can have them do different things. And depending on which rots you've collected, you can unlock different abilities, different skills. So I like the collectible aspect of the game, and controlling these little guys, sort of like Pikmin. But I also like just the ambiance, the environment, and just the story it's going to tell. I'm really, really excited for it.
Cool. Caleb, I'm going to need your help again on how to pronounce the game, because you love these wonderful title games here.
It's Elekhead. So it's essentially it's a 2D puzzle platformer. You're probably sensing a theme here with my kind of games, which
yes.
Visually it's very similar. It's a sort of a simplified Mega Man look to it, but it's mechanically also kind of a simplified game. And I'd argue just a more interesting game. I've never been a huge Mega Man fan, but this kind of game right here scratches my armchair game developer nerdy brain because it's very visually simple. The visual language is very simple. The mechanic is simple, and using that mechanic, using that verb, which is, lighting. There's basically two verbs that have any sort of impact in this game right now. It's touching, which touching the edges turns them yellow, which electrifies them, and throwing. You can throw your head. At least those are the two that are really shown in this trailer. But then those simple mechanics, like any great platformer game, or those simple verbs, like any great platformer game, are built upon. Yeah, it's a very short trailer, so you can just restart it if you want to, or and make my face larger, whichever you want. It's very simple, and each of those verbs build upon one another as you progress throughout the game, and it's by a one-person team, is my understanding. And what I also liked about this, which was something that I was not aware of until this E3. Because, as I said earlier, I never pay attention to the PC shows, and I think this one was this one was in Wholesome Games, I think, but it is a PC only game at this point. What was amazing to me during this E3 show is I finally started paying attention to the PC games a little bit, and I realized that a lot of these PC games, these indie PC games especially, which are the ones that I would like, because they're developed by small developers, one or two developers or a small studio, generally. What we're seeing is the result of them finally getting like a publishing deal or something like that. But the 90% of the iceberg underneath, which is them creating a game before they had a publisher deal, that's all still available to sort of read through. And a lot of indie developers have dev diaries. So you can actually go and play this game or a demo of this game on itch.io or itch.io. I'll say itch.io because it's more fun to say. You can go play this on itch.io right now. You can play a demo of it, and that happened consistently. There's a few other games I'll bring up that you think of E3 as like, here's a game that's been announced and you can either buy it today in a great world, or it comes out months ago. You don't really think in terms of this game has been being developed. You can go back, you can see the history of it. You can actually play a build of this game right now before it got the publishing deal, so you can kind of see what it was that attracted a publisher to the game. Right? It's always going to be a smaller bite-sized thing in itch.io. But you get a sense of like, oh man, of course this should be a bigger game. Of course publisher should pay this developer more money to build it into something bigger. And that's absolutely what Elekhead is. I fell in love with it. It controls so wonderfully, so beautifully. It's great. I'm really, really looking forward to this game. I'm hoping it gets onto other platforms and it doesn't just stay PC only.
Sure. For me next, not a big surprise, and I think it hit on me more later. The more I thought about it, but one of the big ones for me was Mario Party that was shown off in the Nintendo show here yesterday. Yesterday, right? Mario Party Superstars, because they said returning. The one thing to focus on right here is, of course, 5 Nintendo 64 stages. Not just because I'm an N64 fan, but Mario Party 2 is a game I played a ton. This one, of course, is from the first Mario Party. and of course they show off the worst board in Mario Party 2. I don't know what they were thinking, but regardless, give me. I want all the mini games. Give me every single mini game they ever done. This is 100 mini games across the series. Yeah, it's fine because there's like 80 in Mario Party 2. Just give me the best mini games. Give me the button mashers. Give me the classic board games. The one thing that's been getting away from previous Mario parties is the board game element, where everyone's for themselves. Nintendo's been trying to make it more kid friendly, where everyone goes together at the same time in the car. No one goes ahead. It's not a race, the game. It's who can collect the most stars, and sometimes the thing's random and whatnot. But I love the Mario Party series, and I don't need, I guess, a new one every once in a while. But if they can just keep giving me the best of the best, from there, updated, I can play with my friends online. I think that's one thing that they can do. I've been wanting that way. I have friends that live out of state, and they come back for holidays and whatnot. And when they do, we generally always play Mario Party. It's one of the games I almost always feature on the extra live stream is a Mario Party game. Especially when I can get 4 guys together to come and play with me, because it's just a great time. It's you do not need to be the most skilled gamer to enjoy a Mario Party game. It's just a board game like any other board game. Sure, there are games that other people have an advantage of. I'm not the fastest button masher, but there are games that are more likely going to be in your, some games are just more, randomly draw that pick a card kind of thing. It's a great series. I love it. But yeah, I don't know, that one. Happy to see that announced in the Nintendo show yesterday. Dean?
I was watching a Game Explained video of that this morning, and they had shown 40 of the mini games that were revealed are all from the first 3 Mario Parties, so the N64 library.
Okay.
So that's quite a large ratio for, leaving the remaining 60 for the
I will be looking into that so I can, criticize which ones were left in and which ones were... I think there's 100 total, right? So they haven't revealed them all yet, but I have no doubt that DLC or future updates are going to reveal more boards. I'm just wondering why they didn't do this as DLC for Super Mario Party, because that's not that old of a game, right? And
they haven't released any DLC for Super Mario Party at all.
Right.
It's been just collecting dust. So yeah, they recently did allow you to play all the mini games without having to unlock them, I think is what their most recent big thing was. But yeah, that is strange.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just want to point out that, like I said, they announced 5 returning Mario Party N64 boards. Great. So, is there more than 5? I mean, is there more boards? That's what I'm generally curious of. Are they going to dive into the GameCube boards a little bit? But I think the N64 ones are the most memorable. Give me more than 5. Give me 6 or 7. Or I don't know. I'm hoping there's more from 2. Just my hopes. But anyways, Dean, why don't you tell us next about a Final Fantasy game here that's on your list here?
Top Spot did correct me. Super Mario Party did add an online update, apparently.
Okay.
So.
Oh, right, because it was local connect only at right. Sorry, which one is Final Fantasy? Okay, how about 6 games? I don't know. Is it possible to put 25% speed? Because this goes really fast and it's super short.
Let me try here. Let me stop the screen here.
Maybe if the games were better, Dean, they wouldn't have to hurry through.
They are the best. Look, this is a short one. So ultimately, the first 6 Final Fantasy games coming out as remaster on PC, non mobile. It's good news. I know a lot of people were really excited about what they're going to do with Final Fantasy VI. This doesn't preclude anything from happening to Final Fantasy VI. It's just another way for people to experience the first 6 game in a huge library. The announcement, it doesn't give us much detail at all. I imagine what's going to happen is that each of those 6 games are going to be released separately. This is not going to be a single collection. The reason I say that, as we watch these screens go by, there are only screenshots from Final Fantasy 1 to 4. There's nothing from 5. There's nothing from 6 on here. The sprites are all updated, so everything is consistent from Final Fantasy 1 right through Final Fantasy 6. They're all completely redone. There's battle backgrounds in there, and if we remember, the first 3 Final Fantasies only on the NES, so they didn't have the sort of 16-bit style that this remaster gives them. So it's really cool that they sort of consolidated a single art style or a single sprite style for all 6 games. If you look in the top corner and pointing, if you look in the top corner of the battles, there's like fast forward functionality. So I'd be really curious to see how that works, because particularly with the early Final Fantasies, there was a lot of job-based class systems, and if that fast forward button is really just continuously attack, you're not going to win any battles, because if you're a black mage or a white mage, hitting an enemy with your wooden rod isn't going to do anything. Or does it save sort of the last action that you did and continue just pushing those commands through? Does it take your level and your stats and compare them against the enemies and let you automatically win? Like, how does it work?
Could it be even dumber than that? Could it just be speeding up the animations? I'm not familiar with the games. I don't know if there were too many animations to begin with, but
there were. Yeah, that's not dumber. That's smarter. That's probably exactly what it is. Because in the games they would take a step forward, they would do their little dot dot dot, and then you would see an animation on the enemy. So yeah, it might just skip all that altogether. You're smart. Yeah. So that's what it is. But I guess thinking about it, this is the first time we're going to get Final Fantasy III in North America, which is pretty cool. We've got the 3D version on the DS. I think we got it on the PSP. I definitely got it on iOS and Android, but we've never got like the authentic 8-bit version that was released on the Famicom. So it's going to be really cool to experience the Onion Knight story. I'm super excited about it.
Wasn't there an Onion Knight in Demon Souls?
Probably. I didn't get that far.
I didn't either. I just know there's a famous guy who looks like an onion, and I wonder if maybe that's where it took inspiration from. I don't know. Well, since I'm talking, I guess I can go on to my next one.
Go ahead, man. You're next on the list. What was the next game that stood out to you, Caleb?
Axiom Verge 2. This wasn't the first time we had heard about it, and we didn't really get any new information this time. But I wanted to bring it up because the first Axiom Verge absolutely blew my mind. So much so that it's actually it's number 78 in my top favorite games of all time. That's right, 78th, right behind. I'm gonna do this every time, guys. Right behind Ico, and right in front of SteamWorld Quest: Hand of Gilgamesh. The first one was absolutely a love letter to Super Metroid. A love letter to a lot of Metroidvanias, exploration type games. Or as I heard on the most recent Polykill podcast, someone had Hungry Uriah referred to them as gated exploration games, I think, which is kind of a cool way of thinking about it. But the first one blew my mind. It was absolutely a love letter to Super Metroid. Super Metroid is my number 9th favorite game of all time. Let me see. Let me tell you where those are. Right in front of, or right behind Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, and right in front of Inside, which I'll talk a little bit about Inside later on in this thing as well. But the point being, I loved the first Axiom Verge. It's absolutely fantastic. It just feels like Super Metroid in all of the right ways. You can tell it's a love letter, but it also, I think I really fell in love with it. And I will talk about 2 in a bit, I promise. But I really fell in love with it when it started to affect me on kind of a visceral level. There are certain points of the game where you find secret passageways, and you just kind of go through an invisible wall or whatever, and all of a sudden, like you think you're constrained to the boundaries. You go through the invisible wall, and the screen shifts over to this new area that you're in, right? And it shifts in a very dramatic way that the rest of the game doesn't. The rest of the game, you're in the center of the screen always, and the screen kind of follows you around. This is, you think you're at a boundary, you're not. You go through it, and you're in a new area, and that new area looks like a glitched out old game that you need to blow into to get the dust out of it, right? It just looks gross, and it has like this. The music changes up. Thomas Happ is an amazing. I think he's actually a musician before a developer. So the music in these games is fantastic. I think that, I don't know if that's absolutely true, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. But the point being, you go into these little glitched areas and you feel it in your gut. It's almost like it's scary. Like you feel like something's wrong, and you think like the game is not doing something the way it should be, and you're a little uncomfortable, and it just sort of, it just gets you in a way similar to, like, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but If I'm playing a video game where I'm usually kind of on land running around, and then I go into a water area and the water's deep and it sort of fades to black and I can't see the bottom, like that legitimately scares me in video games, because I now I can't move normally. My everything I've learned about character motion is now gone. I'm in an area that's unfamiliar, so enemies are probably going to be new enemy types, and so it's legitimately scary to be in a water world, and you feel it kind of in your gut. You're like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like it. That's what Axiom Verge 1 did that finally made me think, like, there's something special about this game. Like, it's doing something crazy awesome. And this is where I get to Axiom Verge 2. Axiom Verge 1, which I'll say again, has awesome weapons, awesome guns, and everything. But in this trailer for Axiom Verge 2, Thomas Happ says, the first game's all about guns. In the second game, you're a melee character. And I'm scared about that. I don't know if Axiom Verge 2 is going to be what I want it to be. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, because I think just as you can look forward to things in E3, you can also talk about things that you're still kind of looking forward to, but you're a little bit reserved, you're a little bit hesitant, a little bit scared about. I'll still play this game day one, almost certainly, but I am a little bit scared because I don't know why. Melee just doesn't seem like the way that you would want to play one of these games. Imagine playing Super Metroid and all you can do is punch. Like, it would be awful. And so I'm a little bit scared about that. One of the things that they did, like the mechanic though here, is you can also hack enemies. And so if there is an enemy, you can sort of hack into it and make it do something different. So in that kind of way, I guess you kind of have probably ranged combat to some degree, which is kind of cool, especially if you can control enemies that, hover or anything like that. The other thing that he mentioned in the presentation was, in this game, you can actually skip all of the boss fights if you want to. Not skip them as in pressing a button, but if you go into a room and do a big boss arena and there's the boss right there, you can just keep walking and go right past it and not have to fight it. Because he said there was a lot of players in the first game that loved exploring the world. Exploration is one of the draws of a Metroidvania, but they kept getting stuck at the bosses and they would end up not progressing because of that. And he really took that to heart. He's like, I want people to explore this world and really fall in love with the world. Why not just let them move past the boss? And it kind of makes sense. I mean, in a real situation, unless the boss was holding a key and you had to kill it to get the key, why wouldn't you just keep going? So I'm excited, but I'm a little less excited knowing that it's melee only, and I hope it's great.
Speaking of Metroid, next game to talk about is one of the big announcements from yesterday.
Metroid Prime 4.
Not that Metroid. That was the one everyone thought was going to happen.
Metroid Prime Trilogy.
And we end up getting Metroid 5 announced yesterday. This is done by Mercury Labs. Is that what this is called? It's Mercury Steam.
Yeah, same guys that did Samus Returns.
So they did the same ones that did the 3DS game, which is the remake of the second Metroid game, which I was a big fan of on the 3DS. This seemed to be the big announcement. Got a kind of a Portal feel here with some of these robots here. I know, Caleb, I think you were dreading a little bit being.
Yeah, I don't want robots in my Metroid game.
Being chased here.
Yeah, and I don't want that either. Those are the two things I don't want.
So this is one of the holiday games. It's an October release. I'm still a little shocked that 3DS game did not get ported, and maybe that probably. I don't doubt that Nintendo somewhere down the line ports it. Is another easy cash grab. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the eBays right now, the special editions are hard to get. But I don't know. It looks like a Metroid game. I wonder how long this was in development for. Just kind of in comparison for Metroid, because like this one, no one was expecting. I don't think yesterday. I know I saw some people posting later on that they were like, "Just give me another 2D Metroid game. That's what I want." But yeah, it was kind of a one of the big announcements of E3 in my eyes. It was not something I was suspecting, and I guess that's what I kind of always hope for when it comes to E3 is that, hey, returning franchise and something you didn't expect. I didn't expect another 2D Metroid so quick from here, because I guess my focus always I think would be Metroid Prime 4 was the next Metroid coming out. So, any other thoughts on Metroid?
I'm similar to Caleb. I'm just concerned about how much of the game is the chase mechanic, because part of the fun of Metroid for me is exploring just every nook and cranny, and I want to be given the time to be able to do that. And if some of the upgrades or hidden items are, you need to run and then use your jetpack and then bounce off a wall and then backflip and shoot up a rocket and then get into a tiny crevice while you're being chased, that's going to drive me nuts. So
the melee parry is back from Samus Returns. So interesting to see that come back. I mean, I enjoyed it. You guys, were you a fan of the system? I don't know if some people were fans of it. I was personally, but that was used very well.
I never had a 3D. It was on 3DS, right? You said.
Yep.
Yeah, I never had a 3DS, so like I
get a damn 2DS. You can get them for like $40 now.
My son has one, but the thumb thing fell off of it, and I tried playing it with just the knob, and it hurts my thumb. It hurts my little thumbs. So I never played it, but yeah, I heard mixed reactions about the melee or the parry, I guess it is, right? But you guys seem to like it, so and I trust you guys. So.
Thank you.
Today.
Well, with that being said, Dean, what is your next game on this list here? Yeah,
the next game is another indie title. This one is called Planet of Lana, an Off-Earth Odyssey. You don't get to see much in the trailer, but it just really caught my attention with sort of the hand-painted aesthetic to it. It sounds like it's going to be a game where you play as this girl, this younger sister, and the point is to save your older sister who is on the other side of the planet. You have this little animal companion, and you just solve puzzles and go through the usual action platformy sort of stuff. Seems a little cinematic. I'm curious. You'll see here there's rockets falling down on this sort of serene landscape, and obviously that's meant to represent technology coming in to sort of taint the land. And I'm wondering how on the nose that theme is going to be, because we see it often in games, especially in the indie space, where you're trying to save nature and just fight back technology. And I'm wondering if this is going to be sort of a metaphor of the times we live in, or if it's going to be sort of a unique take on that, because there are some instances like this where you're fighting more organic creatures, or whether or not that was a fight, maybe you're asking for help from that big guy. But it'll just be interesting to see how the story plays out. Either way, I'm sold on it. It's pretty.
It's pretty.
I think it's a 3D remake of Missile Command. That's what those things coming down.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah. So you're just gonna be blowing up missiles when they come in. Spoiler. Sorry.
Caleb, you're next on this list.
Oh man, I'm next. Okay, Death's Door. All right, so Death's Door. It looks like it's sort of a. It looks like a Zelda-like with a much heavier focus on action and combat. So maybe like more of a Hyper Light Drifter kind of game. But I love those types of games. Those are the types of games where I can kind of deal with combat heavy. I'm usually kind of a weenie when it comes to games. I don't like a difficult game. But when you pair it with sort of exploration, Zelda-like exploration, then I can definitely stomach it. Hyper Light Drifter is a favorite game of mine. Unfortunately, I don't have easy access to which number that is on my list, though I could probably find it. But yeah, it looks really cool. It's being published by Devolver Digital, and they're quickly becoming a publisher that I pay attention to every single thing they release. I don't necessarily play everything because there's certain just games that are just not my cup of tea, but they know what kind of games they publish. And this, on first glance, doesn't really look like it would be a Devolver Digital game. So something about it's got to be a little different or a little unique or just a little exceptional. And I'm really, really excited to see what that is. It reminds me kind of in visuals and even maybe gameplay of a game published by Sodesco, developed by the people who did Tesla Grad. I can't remember the name of that. Rain Games, I think, called World of the West, which is one of the best Zelda-likes ever. If you've never played World of the West, put that on your list. It's fantastic if you like a Zelda-like game. Highly underrated, absolutely brilliant, and my 52nd favorite game of all time, World of the West. Right behind Katamari Damacy, and right in front of Jak and Daxter, the Legacy. So I think it's a little bit better than Jak and Daxter. Blink, come at me. So yeah, it looks really, really cool. You play as a crow, and you're basically reaping souls of the dead, and it's your job, and it becomes monotonous, but you're a crow. That's what you do. And it says, I'm reading a description here. The job gets lively when your assigned soul is stolen, and you must track down a desperate thief you must track down that desperate thief to a realm that's untouched by death, where creatures grow far past their expiration, which is just a really cool idea. And maybe that's why Devolver's interested, because it sounds like a Devolver thing if you read that out loud. So there we go. Death's Door. Look forward to it. Although I think it's Xbox only right now, so it's one that I will. It's more and more. There's going to be so many games on my list that I'm just inevitably going to have to buy an Xbox, and I'm gonna be very happy when I do.
Is it a roguelike?
I don't think so. And now that nothing that I've read says that it is. If it is, that would definitely turn me off. In fact, that would actually just make me not even want to play it at all. I hate roguelike games. I've never played one that I actually enjoy. People say Hades is the one that you should play. I'll play it eventually, but I hate them. I want a scripted. I want to know that I want to know that there's a vision at play, and that I'm participating in, and I'm going to experience a very specific vision for a story. And roguelikes generally don't do that, except again, Hades, I think, is the exception from what I've heard. So if you find out it is a roguelike, Dean, tell me so that I can be sad.
And you can cross it off your Xbox One to playlist. Here.
Cross it off. I should keep an actual list on my wall of like, here's the games that are Xbox only. When it gets to a certain number, then I'm like, all right, got to get one.
Next one for me is a game we saw a lot of at the Square Enix show, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy. I mentioned it before. It's surprising what like that one week can do for one of Marvel's like D-list properties, right? Once seeing this game starting to play out at first, I was assuming it would be online multiplayer game. Sure, you can play, because we've seen a few games like that this year where like, yeah, you can play it by yourself, but it's probably better that you play with 4 people. And this game was advertised as, nope, you're Star-Lord, and you're with the Guardians are on it. It seems like it has a little bit of the Mass Effect feel, where they want you to choose sides, and your decisions can probably affect the outcome. Of someone hating you or liking you more. But I don't know. But here's a prime example of that right here. Where do you side with Drax? Do you call it Groot? I don't know. It seems interesting. Comes out this October. It looks pretty. I don't know. The combat, it looked good to me. The one thing about it is, I know I saw Dean mention it, or Dean did mention it, while watching it live, that you got to command, like, hey, Gamora, go over here and use her slice attack. And hey, Rocket, you're better off doing this thing. When most of the time that action is in games, I'm mostly just focusing on myself. And the only time I ever decide to make that command switch to having someone do something is when I'm getting completely owned. And I realize, hey, a slice attack is probably best against this person because my blasters aren't working the best. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good property now. It's a lively property for Marvel. It's definitely in my wheelhouse right here for a game I think I would like to play. It looks like it has a little bit of the Avengers. I don't say not so much the beat 'em up parts of it, but definitely the more action-y Tomb Raider-y parts for this game. I know it has a licensed soundtrack, so that's definitely going to cost some bucks for this game. And I think one of the special editions came with the soundtrack for the game. So it's something that's right in my wheelhouse. I'm not sure if it's day one for me. I'm not sure if it's day one, but it's definitely, maybe if it comes out in October, maybe there's a Black Friday buy 2 get 1 free sale. Something I can pick it up myself right here. But yeah, it was a game I was not expecting, which is what I essentially tune in E3 for, right? And it's coming out this year. That's what I want when I tune in E3. And this is one of those kind of games for me where didn't think I wanted this game. I'm going to play it at some point. I just don't know if it's going to be day one for me. So, yeah.
Did you play the Telltale Guardians?
I did. Great game.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of the Telltale games, it was a good game. So that's a great comparison there, Dean. All right. On to the next here. Rabbids. Not a fan of Rabbids here, Dean. Why should I play Mario and Rabbids?
Because it just works.
It does.
I don't know why. This is probably one of my favorite things that's come out of E3 this year. Like Kingdom Battle was my very first Nintendo Switch game, and I was super skeptical. I didn't like the Rabbids on their own. I don't like that Rayman universe of the Rabbids. But I ended up just absolutely loving this, and to see another one is great. It looks totally different though, in terms of combat mechanics, and I think that's incredibly ballsy. And I'd be really curious to hear the reasoning behind that, because it's one thing to accept Mario and Rabbids in the same universe. I think that was sort of the first hurdle for people to clear. And for those of us that did sort of accept, okay, let's just see how these two play together. You also had to accept an Ubisoft version of Mario where the concept of the game, or the only direction they got, was Mario can't jump, right? So not only do you have to imagine these two universes colliding, but you also have to imagine a fun Mario game where his trademark mechanic is taken away. How is that going to be any fun? And it was turn-based strategy. It was being very particular about your placement and where you're hitting enemies from, and from beginning to end, along with the music and the colorful graphics and everything, it just became such a hit. I really haven't heard many complaints about the game from those who have actually played it. So to take that core mechanic away and say it's no longer going to be sort of a grid-based tactics game is just really intriguing. So yeah, I'd love to see sort of what the logic was behind that and how it plays out in the end. I love the ideas of these sparks being Rabbids and Lumas. I like how each character sort of has their own elemental power that you can sort of unleash in battle. It's great to see all the characters from the first game return. You have Peach, Luigi, Mario, and then the Rabbid counterparts to those. But there's also some new characters. You have Rabbid Rosalina. You have the punk Rabbid that pops out of the bushes here in a bit. I'm curious how Cursa, which is that big thing floating behind, that big sort of space entity, how it's going to be as a protagonist or antagonist rather. I think Mario, the series, has sort of been hit and miss with antagonists that I really like. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Very Smash Bros. Or Avengers vibes here. But yeah, it'll be fun to see. I'm sold anyway. First day one.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sold too. It's a game. So I was skeptical about the first Mario plus Rabbids game. I'm not a huge tactics fan, turn-based tactics kind of fan, but I am enough, that I am a Mario fan. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It was so much better than I thought it would be, and I think it's so much better than it had any reason for being. I personally found the Rabbids, at least in this game, I'm not familiar with them outside of this game. I thought they were pretty funny. I laughed many times. Like it was totally. It was good. I totally enjoyed it. Totally liked it. And it's interesting that you say, Mario can't jump, because it wasn't until he said that I was like, oh yeah, he didn't jump in that game. Like it didn't even matter to me. Like I didn't even think of him not jumping. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where it goes. What's weird is like I would have been totally fine with a Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle 2 and had the exact same mechanics, the same game, just in different worlds, different enemies, and I would have been totally fine with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I loved Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. In fact, it's my 29th favorite video game of all time, right behind Days Gone and right in front of Hyper Light Drifter.
Ooh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Where do you think Somerville will fall on that list here?
I can tell you what Somerville reminds me a lot of, and that's Limbo and Inside. Inside being my 10th favorite video game of all time. Limbo being number 11. Limbo right in front of God of War, and Inside right behind Super Metroid. That's right. I like Limbo more than God of War Remake.
What?
I did. Yes. So those are my kind of games, man. They speak to me. But yeah, Somerville looks so cool. It's made by one of the devs from Playdead, so the people who created Inside and Limbo, which is why this game kind of looks like Inside, more so than Limbo. So the conceit of the game is that it's a puzzle platformer adventure game, and it's been talked about as sort of the game Inside, but during an alien apocalypse. And at one point, you'll probably see here coming up, you're actually running down the hallway with your family, and there's like there's like an alien, I guess, trying to protect you, shooting fire behind you to ward off enemies that are chasing after you. So at some point, I think you team up with an alien or something like that. I'm a little bit the one thing I'm worried. Well, two things I'm kind of worried about. One specifically with this game, it's going to be interesting to see how one of the minds behind Play Dead treat a party mechanic, because Inside and Limbo work so well because there's such a sense of unyielding solitude, and it's you in a completely unfamiliar world trying to figure things out. Everything's creepy and weird, and this is a group of people that sort of have to play off of each other. It's a group of people who know each other really well. I'm hoping it doesn't lean too hard on pulling on like family heartstrings and stuff, because Inside and Limbo were able to pull on emotional strings that you didn't even know existed, and family is such a trope, and so I'm hoping it doesn't really lean into that. The other thing I'm a little bit worried about is so the guy behind this studio, which is Jump Ship, they're the ones doing Somerville. Dino Patti, I think is his name. He was the co-founder of Play Dead. He's the one who's now at Jump Ship, created Jump Ship, and is creating Somerville. I've read that the reason for him kind of leaving Play Dead was there's some just creative kind of differences. In fact, he just said there was some kind of fallout or whatever. And if this is the game that the guy who leaves Play Dead is making, and it looks a lot like a Play Dead game and probably plays like a Play Dead game, it makes me really curious about what the rest of Play Dead will make. Because if Dino Patti was the guy with the look and everything, what was the other guy? What did he do? And I'm hoping that other guy is not the like freaky, rot you to the core, emotional kind of guy, because those two things work really well together, and now they're separate. Obviously, when Somerville releases, we'll figure it out. But I think Somerville's also, I want to say it's also like a PC only. Maybe I'll look into that. That might not be true. But yeah, I knew there's something about it that I was like, I don't know if I'll get to play this. My PC sucks. That's why I can't really play PC games. But I'm super looking forward to it. The aesthetic looks awesome. I can't wait.
Cool. Well, next on my list is a game that I know Dean has played, because I played it with him. We played it at a local Mexican restaurant that has an arcade, and it's one of my favorite arcade games from the past. And I immediately showed it to my buddies from high school, because we used to play this at a bowling alley. This one's called Cruisin' Blast, but we used to play Cruisin' USA, Exotica. I'm trying to blank on the other one's name. Cruising World. Yeah, so we love the franchise. I remember, I think even Dean, when we were playing it, I was like, I wonder if this game will ever get ported to the Switch. Like, it just seemed like it was easy money. Even if it's like a $20 digital only game, I'm gonna snag it up, because I love the Cruising franchise. Yeah, the only knock against it in the arcade was that it was very expensive. I think it might have been like a $1 or $2 to play kind of game. Or,
yeah, it was like 15 Canadian dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, it's one of those things where it's like, I would play it more. So, yep, right there off the little cabinet right there, we had to sit in. But yeah, it's a franchise I love. I'm glad it's come back around. I don't know if Midway's doing this, because I don't know if Midway's still around, but Nintendo owns the rights to the franchise. Notice this, that they did a cruising game before F-Zero? Notice that? Yeah, because cruising's better than F-Zero, so suck it. Yeah. Anyways,
it's like
yeah.
a franchise that's no longer being developed for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to see Cruisin' return. Yeah, it's glad it's finally getting ported to a home console. So yeah. Next on this list, Dean, what is your next game on this list here? Well, I'll pull it up.
That's the game I'm super excited about. It's the first time I saw it was during this E3 weekend. It's called Fire Girl. I don't know why. I was drawn to it. I think there's just not enough firefighting games out there, at least in the last decade. I know there was some on the 16-bit consoles, but I think Ramvox was talking about that on a very early episode of Retro Fandango, that there's not enough firefighter games in North America in comparison with Japan. But it just looks like a ton of fun, right? You're this little firefighter. It's a nice mix of 2D and 3D artwork. You're saving people from burning buildings, from forest fires. Each mission looks like it's timed, so you you collect clocks to increase. So of course there's going to be leaderboards. But what I really like about it is that you can recruit your fire brigade. There's like an in-game economy where you can upgrade your equipment. You can increase your stats here. You can, just buy different items and different loadouts for the different missions, and you can expand and renovate the fire hall. It just reminds me of like, if you guys have played Mercenary Kings or even like SteamWorld Dig to some extent, you have sort of your hub that slowly expands with more and more NPCs that do more and more things for you, and you can customize your different skill loadouts for your next trip down under. In this case, your next trip out to the next fire call. But it just aesthetically looks super pleasing, and then the RPG elements just really sell me on it.
Cool.
I was not aware of that game, and you just sold me on it because that looks really cool. I missed that one somehow, but that looks really, really cool. I love that.
400 games. It's easy to miss.
That's true. See, so my next one is a game called Replaced, which is interesting that it follows Fire Girl because it shares some similarities in the aesthetics. There's been a lot of games recently, ever since, at least I've been made aware of them ever since Octopath Traveler, that goes for that sort of HD 2D kind of look where it mixes pixels with just tilt shift kind of looks and other just aesthetic. Like here you see God rays essentially coming out of like pixels and stuff. Like I love. So first of all, it's the aesthetic that got me, but what I really love about the aesthetic and what seems to be a trend of these sort of HD 2D pixel things is that I feel like we're finally getting to a point where pixels are not just nostalgia fodder. Like we're not just trying to tap into people's emotions. They're actually doing cool, unique things with that art style. And that's really, really, really interesting to me. And I'm really excited about it. It feels like, often I feel like we're at a point now where the developers making some of these games didn't grow up with pixels. We're finally at a point where like they have no nostalgic connection. They simply just, to be fair, I have no idea how old the developers of the Replaced are, but I feel like I can say with some sort of confidence that, people who are in their 20s probably didn't grow up with pixelated graphics. A lot of indie developers are in their 20s, so I'm just making an assumption there now. But they just appreciate the art style, and they want to do cool things with it and change it up a little bit and have just fun with it. And that's, I think, what Replaced is doing here. Replaced also looks like a game, though I can't confirm, where some of the set pieces look like they're also sort of real world modeled into the game itself, or they're just really textured, very, very cool like, and they're using cool shaders and things like that. But I really like the look of it. I'm a sucker. I love the cyberpunk thing. I hope the cyberpunk thing keeps going for years and years and years and years and years. I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. I truly love it. But it looks really cool. It looks a lot like there was a game that was announced at E3 in 2017 called The Last Night. And I haven't heard anything else about The Last Night, but it looks like maybe it's the same game. Honestly, they look so similar. And I tried to do some research to see if maybe they are the same game and there was some reason they had to change the name or something like that. I can't find anything about that. But that's just to say that if you like the look of the Replaced and the cyberpunk aesthetic and everything, keep your eye on maybe The Last Night if it ever comes out, because it looks very, very similar. Published by CodeSync. They publish a lot of really awesome games that I love. And the developer here is called Sad Cat Studio, which I have never heard of, but I'm excited.
Do you think this pixel style, now that it's becoming more prominent and less generic, they're doing more and more things with it, do you think it'll ever permeate into film or different mediums? Because we haven't really seen like a pixel show or a pixel movie.
There's a movie called Pixels starring Adam Sandler.
We're
already there, Dean. Okay, we're already there.
I'm just wondering, like non-interactive storytelling, do you think it's a nice aesthetic or an effective aesthetic to use? Because I think it
could be really cool. Yeah, like I don't see why not. I mean, I guess the only difference is that generally when you think of pixels, you think of 2D side-scrolling, and that sort of flat pane might not necessarily work so well in a long scripted thing. You'd have to do. I mean, of course, there are 2D animations that are, long running, but those are also incredibly dynamic and things like that. So you'd probably people would have to make that leap from sort of pains to something a little bit more complex, I guess. But that people should be able to do that. I mean, there's very creative, smart people out there, as evidenced by these trailers that we're seeing. So, yeah, that's interesting that it hasn't. From my understanding, maybe if anyone else in the chat knows whether or not that's ever happened, but can't think of anything. Yeah, I'd love to see it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Adam Sandler. Telling you. Anyways, yeah. So sorry to get away from these great Pixel guys, but we got to talk about Breath of the Wild 2 here because that's the next game on my list here. So yeah, it was a surprise to me because I thought we were gonna get other Nintendo games. I didn't think we were gonna get this at all. I thought, granted, we still didn't get much, and I want to rewind here real quick because I was talking with Mark from the Cartridge Brothers. Right, where is it? Come on, show yourself. There you go. I wonder if this is the return of Ganondorf right here. Because we only had Calamity Ganon. It was one of my big complaints. There's two complaints I kind of had about Breath of the Wild. It's a fantastic game. One of my two complaints was I prefer if Ganondorf would have been there as opposed to just getting space goop again. And I wanted temples back. Or dungeons back. Sure, going to the
Shrines.
The shrines are fine, but no, the four.
The divine beasts.
Yes, the four divine beasts was one thing, but I wanted dungeons. Like, to me, like, it was so close to being the best Zelda game, missing two things. It was Ganondorf not being there. I need Ganondorf before he becomes whatever monster he's going to become. I need that trope. I know they were trying to get away from probably everything that makes a Zelda game, like the standard Zelda game, you have to do dungeons. But I want that. I want that in a Zelda game. So we're so close. But still, Breath of the Wild was a fantastic game. I didn't 100% it, but I did 100% all the shrines. So that was my little, I didn't want to go after the 900 Korok seats. But
what may play into your theory, like, pause it right here, if you don't mind. What may play into your theory that this is a prequel is you'll notice the outfit that Link's wearing, or we assume it's Link. We never really see his face in the whole trailer, so maybe it's not Link, But that outfit it looks to be this. And there's a tweet that was sent out about this. I didn't notice this myself, but that looks to be the same outfit that in Breath of the Wild, when you look at, I don't know if it was the map or what it was, but there was like a topiary. No, that's a plant thing. There was a thing that had like the figures and the whole like War of Calamity Ganon kind of like etched out or whatever. And there was an image of the hero dressed in like an over the shoulder green thing. And that sketch or that etching from Breath of the Wild was before the events of Breath of the Wild. So it could very well be that this is the prequel, and this does show how Calamity Ganon became Calamity Ganon. And that could also be why they haven't given it a name yet, because the name is probably something like before Calamity, it would give it away. So it could very well be that. And that would be awesome. I'd love it.
Yeah, they did say, I think maybe yesterday or today, that they are holding back on giving the name because they think people will decipher exactly what they're holding back by the name. So
and I think right now they're just calling it the follow-up, right? I think they've called it the sequel a few times.
Yeah, it's a sequel to Legend.
Yeah, a sequel can also mean just it's the game that follows. So, I mean,
we got hang gliders back. So there's two vibes I've taken from this game as well too. One of them is that I see a lot of Skyward Sword in the sky parts here, and I see I see Twilight Princess too. I see references to the two Wii games. One that I played Twilight Princess on the GameCube, but like right here, this very much feels like Twilight Princess, like the Shadow World. With the castles and whatnot. It could just be, and plus the original trailer too, it had a very serious vibe to it, very much like Twilight Princess, where maybe they are trying to go for a cross between both, or I don't know. It seems like, I don't know. It just seems like they're trying to mix blends. Hopefully there's no motion controls, because that's my big complaint about Skyward Sword. Well, there's a lot of things wrong with Skyward Sword. We'll talk about that some other time. But anyways, yeah, I was not expecting to see this game yesterday. Big surprise. Very interesting. And I look forward to seeing more in the future. Deansy, you're up next on this list here. Sorry.
Yeah, this one is this one I wanted to talk about because it gives me really mixed feelings. This is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Now I love the Final Fantasy franchise. I feel I could keep up with conversation with the most hardcore fans. But even though this was a Square Enix conference and we see Nomura's name come up on the screen and the guy's like, I need to kill Chaos, who is the main antagonist of Final Fantasy 1. It wasn't until like 3/4 of the way through the trailer when you see like this bomb here that I knew it was a Final Fantasy game. Like it just feels so disconnected from Final Fantasy, or what I feel a Final Fantasy is. And even though each game is different, all of the 15 mainline games have kept enough similarities to make them feel like a Final Fantasy product. This one just really didn't for me. It was just, it's so bleak, so like washed out. I don't know if you guys have played Final Fantasy Mobius. It's a really long mobile game, but it does the same thing as this. It reimagines what Final Fantasy 1 could have been. You play as the Warrior of Light. You traverse to defeat Garland, who is this guy, and ultimately Chaos. You have Princess Sarah of Cornelia, like all the same characters, just reimagined in a really dark and gritty aesthetic on the mobile. So for them to do that again, granted Team Ninja is an entirely different studio, and it'll be interesting to see their take on it. I'm not sold on it. I watched a bit of gameplay footage, and it's entirely different from this trailer. Really? Not from a visual perspective. It's still sort of dark and gritty, but in this trailer, and Ryan, I know you commented that you felt like this felt more like a Platinum Games.
Yeah.
Well, you had said this felt more Platinum than Babylon's Fall did.
Yep.
But the trailer for me didn't seem fluid at all when it came to combat. Okay. It just seemed like super choppy and just your standard like 3-hit combos just repeated after each other. And we are so far beyond that in Final Fantasy now, since they've gone to active time combat, that it just seemed like a huge step back. So watching these gameplay demonstrations sort of alleviated that concern for me, because there are some additional elements that the trailer doesn't show. There's a break gauge in the enemies, so you can stagger them. There's a stamina gauge on your end, so you can only do a certain number of actions. There's a pretty cool magic mechanic where the longer you hold down the trigger buttons, the more powerful your magic spells will be. Your Firaga, depending on how long you can hold it down without being interrupted by a hit. I think it needs a lot of polish. I think it needs a better player demonstrating it. But overall, I'm gonna play it. I'm just not super sold on the dark and dismal version of a game that's, even though it's heavy, there's a lot of bright moments in it.
His half-button T-shirt looks pretty cool, though, right?
Yeah.
It looks a little bit
his name is Jack, which doesn't.
That seems very. Wasn't Final Fantasy 1 like kind of like set in like castles, and like it wasn't it more of an old, like what's the era I'm thinking of? Obvious, like
it was like more medieval, like English.
Medieval. Thank you.
Yeah, it sort of strayed away. Like when Dragon Quest got ported as Dragon Warrior over to North America, it really kept that like heavy English medieval style. Final Fantasy purposely strayed away from the ye, thy, that language, the Shakespearean stuff, but it's still very much castles and knights and shining armor and princesses and elves and high fantasy stuff too. So I'd be curious if anybody in the chat is a Final Fantasy fan, what you thought of this one, because it is totally left field from anything else I've seen.
Yeah, when we watched it live, I could tell that you were disappointed when we were watching it live. But so it's good to see that the gameplay that you've watched has since sort of alleviated. Because I want you to get good Final Fantasy games. That makes me happy when you're happy.
Me too.
It looks a little bit like Devil May Cry. Even the Jack looks like it could be Nero or his brother or something like that with the haircut.
Okay, then let Capcom have it.
I'm just missing the shooting part. It looks like it's at the slashing part, but not the shooting part. But then I didn't watch the more elaborate breakdown of it like you did. So,
one thing I will mention: there is a really cool on-the-fly class system. So each of your characters can have their own class. You can change it at any time. You have skill trees associated with that class, and it looks like once you learn those skills, they carry over to other classes, similar to like a Final Fantasy Tactics. So I think that part is pretty cool because the class he's playing as is a great sword, so very slow, very like not nimble when it comes to combat. And I think a different class would have been a better showcase for the trailer.
well, what would you say about Inscription there? And Caleb,
Hey, you got one of them. One of the titles I threw at you. So yeah, Inscription was another game that immediately I was arrested by its visual style. It has a crazy awesome visual style. I'm not a huge fan of card games just because I haven't played too many of them. The last one I played was Hand of Gilgamesh by the SteamWorld game Hand of Gilgamesh, and I really, really enjoyed it. So it made me think I should probably pay more attention to card games because I really like that. This game just has a dark aesthetic that I really, really like. It also mixes a lot of media, and that's kind of been a theme with a lot of the games that I like. It looks like it's kind of taking real world assets. These particular clips that you're watching right now are not that way, but you'll see later there's some like real world video assets that look like they're interwoven into it a little bit. This is also a game that I found that had a development has a development history on itch.io and has been being developed there. So I actually downloaded a demo, or it's like a slice of life, sort of vertical slice of where the game started. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here that wasn't in that demo, but the way that the game works, it's really cool. Like at least in the demo that I played, it's like a very simple, dumbed down Magic the Gathering type of battle card game. And it starts out, it's first person perspective. You have your hand of cards, and it doesn't look like you're even playing anybody because it's just darkness on that side, but there's cards. But you look up and you see kind of two like little white eyes just kind of glaring at you. And you're like, okay, so there is someone over there. I just can't really see him that well. And you battle your cards, and every time you get a point, it puts a little cube on like the scales of justice kind of scale. And the goal is that you want to weigh their side all the way down. So the more points you get, the more it weighs it down. And if you think about it, though, that means that there's no real set number of hit points or set number of points you need to get, because they could just start outweighing yours. So it's really just a war of attrition. It's like whoever can sort of get the most the quickest. Like you have to be able to not only just beat them, but keep beating them until it finally weighs it down. And originally I'm thinking, well, that kind of sucks because that's a moving goalpost for a game and I don't want that. But what was really cool, and I hope this appears in like the full game a lot more, is I'm playing this other guy. I've beaten him. I've beaten two hands, and he says on the third hand, the first time he attacks me and I lose some points or whatever, he says, "You know what? I'll let you use my knife." And he just puts a knife down next to your table, and he goes, "Just a warning, though. If you use the knife, you're not going to have a good hand anymore." And of course, you're like, "Oh well, it's speaking literally of my hand and card hands. Haha, very funny pun." But if you use the knife, what it does is it literally like cuts off your hand, and your hand goes on the scale, so it weighs it down a whole lot, and so you get essentially points for using it. But now you can no longer hold your cards, so you just have to deal with the cards on your battlefield, and those are the only cards you can use for the rest of the game. And I'm hoping that there's a lot of that kind of cool mechanic, like the way that they can use the scales in different ways by, it. And then there's also a narrative to it, because you're playing, it's first person perspective. You're playing, and as you're thinking through your cards, which move you're going to be, the guy like whispers, he's like, "Hey, I thought you said you were alone." And you look around and there's still no one else here. And you're like, "What?" So this guy sees somebody, and then you keep playing. And later he's like, "Yeah, the person behind you. I thought you said you were alone." And you can't turn around in the game. So it's like, crap, there's someone behind me. I don't know what's going on there. I'm trying to play this card game. And it's really tense, and it's really, really, really interesting. And that small slice wasn't even in the trailer we just saw. The trailer was 1,000 other things. It didn't even show this thing. And so I'm like, wow, man, they really did some cool stuff with this game. I can't wait. Again, I think it's a game that's only on PC, so I'm hoping that it gets. Although it's a low FI game, so I doubt it's going to tax my system. So this is probably one that I'll buy on PC if it's only that. But it looked really cool. I'm just so enamored by it. It started off as a game jam game, which is, for anyone who's not familiar with game jams, they're just basically like quick challenges in the game developing community. They're like, hey, we're going to do a game jam, a 3-day game jam. You have to build a whole game in 3 days, and the topic is. And they just come up with a random topic. The topic is every jump hurts you, so you just have to like think, okay, let's build a game about that. And most of those games they're just practice games. They're just games to kind of get your skills going. They're to throw out ideas. It's kind of a prototyping type of thing. And that's what this started as. So it's really cool to see like there was something there that this developer knew like this should be fleshed out. And then Devolver Digital is like, yeah, we should pay for that to get fleshed out. So I'm very excited about it. It's really cool.
That's really cool. That would be a trailer that I'd watch and not think twice about. I would just sort of let it go as a card battler. It looked like there was like some puzzle elements.
Yeah.
You're unlocking stuff, but the way you explained it with sort of the not horror subplot, but definitely a lot more going on than just collecting cards and using them against standard NPCs.
That's like my biggest takeaway from this E3. I mentioned it earlier, but it really is. If there's a small indie looking game that looks interesting to me, first place I'm gonna go is to Itch.io and see like, is this a game that has a demo? Like, has it been being developed? Because what's interesting is it seems like the publishers, when it comes to these indie games, they're not like forcing the developers to take down those early builds. Most of them are like, yeah, I'll keep it up if you want. I don't care. It's there. Like, let people get interested and download it or whatever. So I hope that maintains. But that's what I've really taken away from this E3.
Cool.
Speaking of another Devolver Digital game shown, Shadow Warrior 3. I didn't know there was one or two, to be honest.
Yeah, how have I never played a Shadow Warrior game? This looks awesome.
It looks like Doom.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
I love Doom 2016. Not a fan of Doom Eternal at all. I did not like the changes they made to it, but this game looks phenomenal. It's right in my wheelhouse. Everything, like I said, it looks like an absolute Doom ripoff, but it just looks great. Like I said, I should really look in to see if there is actually a Shadow Warrior 1 and 2.
Yeah, there definitely is.
Oh, there is. Yeah.
I would say I feel like an idiot because I never seen one of them before, and I don't know if they play exactly like Doom 2016. Like this is just complete ripoff right here of Doom. All this right here, ripping things out, throwing us bombs. I don't know. It's just.
Although the first one came out in 2013, before Doom 2016.
Oh, so Doom 2016 ripped this off.
Maybe.
Okay.
Although I don't know if the first one plays quite like this, so I guess I should preface that. I'm just looking at the
it's just, I don't know. It's one of those games that I think it was shown off last year too, and this is like more of a look at it. But I don't know. It just looks great. So Devolver Digital is what they started their show off with before they went into their normal spiel. So.
There actually was a small playable demo of this. Last year at E3, Devolver Digital did their Devolver Land Expo thing. I don't know if you ever went through that. They created a 3D expo that you could walk around in because there wasn't a real one. So they're like, we'll just make our own. And they made Devolver Land Expo. But it was a Devolver thing. So it was like kind of creepy and weird. And you walked around fighting robots in the expo. It was really cool. But they did have a playable demo of it now that I'm thinking through it. I said earlier, how have I never played a Shadow Warrior game? But Shadow Warrior 3, there was a playable, very short, little playable thing. And it's probably still downloadable from Steam if you just download Devolver Land Expo. It was a free download. But yeah, I remember now thinking about it, that was a standout for me in that whole VR experience. Or not VR, but just experience thing. It was cool.
Mm-hmm. Dean, I know you mentioned this earlier. Is this one game I think you were looking for, or you wanted one and you got one?
Yeah, this is this was the Nintendo showcase, and they showed Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot, which got me super excited. I think Advance Wars is a huge underground hit. They're cult following because we haven't really got a lot of those pixelated turn-based strategy games, and this looks like a really cool not reimagining, but remaster of both of the games. Here we're only seeing the first one. We're seeing Advance Wars 1, but I imagine 2 is going to look very similar. Have you guys played the Advance Wars series?
Mm-mm.
No. So yeah, super fun. Again, turn-based strategy, pretty basic. You have your units on the board, but each unit represents sort of a squad. So that one tank could actually be 10 tanks. And as you battle out, you'll see your counters go down. That counter reflects how much defense and how much attack you have. Really takes terrain into consideration. But you can also recruit people that you fight once you win battles. There's certain win conditions that you can actually recruit the commanding officers from the opposing teams for the rest of the game. And those commanding officers have different powers. Like the guy with the big beard, Olaf, he has a power that just makes a blizzard come through and snow over all the terrain. So your units are fine, but all the other units are either frozen or they can't move as far. So there's a lot of additional mechanics that it throws in as well. Really ahead of its time for the Game Boy Advance era. And it's going to be really cool to see it come back. I hope they do more Advance Wars, just new campaigns in the future, not just reboots of the old games, but super endearing characters and fun game.
Do any of the attacks feature plagues by chance?
No, they don't.
Because Caleb's next game is a Plague's Tale.
Yeah, man. So this was probably my highlight of E3, unless I've said already earlier that something else is the highlight. Then that was the highlight. But this, if I haven't, this is the highlight. So A Plague's Tale: Innocence was super. It got I don't want to say underrated because I think it was adequately rated. It was a fantastic game, but it was also like a AA sort of budget title. So it probably, I mean, it made its money back easily, I'm sure. And it was my 26th favorite game of all time, right behind Death Stranding and right in front of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. So yeah, A Plague Tale: Innocence is a fantastic game. I just absolutely loved it. I was originally thought I was going to be turned off by it because it seems like a stealth game, and I'm not a big stealth game fan, but it does it right, and it does it in a way that's serviceable and actually really, really fun. But we have no idea what the sequel to it, Plague Tale or Plague Tale Requiem. We just know it's coming in 2023, long time from now. We know nothing else about it, so I can't. I'll stop talking. It's late, so I don't want to keep droning on. But I'm just super excited about it. If you have not played Innocence, do it. It's not on Game Pass anymore. It was at one time, but it's still worth buying it. It's so good.
Is it the same setting as Innocence?
It looks like it. It does look like it. Yeah. Okay. And it looks like it is a direct sequel because there were some indications that in the first one, this isn't a spoiler. This is stuff you could have learned early on, but the little boy Hugo, he has like an infection or some kind of thing. And that thing allows him to control rats essentially. And so in this one, you see him looking, a plague of rats. There you go. And in this one, you see him looking pretty serene, like he's in control of his powers. There's lots of rats going around, so I feel like this one's going to be him wrestling with that power a little bit. And then the woman in the story is his sister, and it basically you control the sister and you navigate Hugo to safety throughout the entire game. Is it? So it feels like a long what's it called? Like when you lead someone around in a game.
Escort mission.
Thank you. It seems like it would be a long escort mission, but it's not nearly as drab as that implies.
Cool.
The next one on my list, I don't have a good segue for it, is Rocksmith Plus. So I know this one I think is literally just, I think this is right now it's only open PC beta or something right now at the moment. So I had this for PS3, the two versions of PS3. I know they re-released it for PS4, and I actually used to play guitar. So, I still have my guitar and I have the bass. The service for it worked great for how it is, where you would plug your guitar into the console with the regular plug, and it does a great job of actually teaching if you ever want to learn how to play guitar, taking it really slow with like one string at a time, and eventually it really starts catching on and says, hey, okay, you're getting really good at this, and it slowly starts progressing. It does never throws a lot at you at all. And when it feels like if you're struggling, it really starts peeling it back right away too, to make you get more comfortable with the game. And I've learned how to play like Wait, trying to think what's the name of that one band song. Queens of the Stone Age. I learned to play a few of their songs. Via the first game. My only drag, I guess gripe against it is I wanted more tracks. Granted, it's licensed music, so that's probably not cheap. And there was tons of DLC packs, but I just wanted more and more and more of that. So if this was a game with a bigger roster of music, I'm all sold for getting this here. I just wanted to come to consoles because I prefer. Granted, I probably could play this on my PC. I just don't want to, if that makes any sense. But yeah, Rocksmith, I recommend it. Glad to see it's not dead because I actually enjoy it better than Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero is just for people that want to just, I guess, mess around and have fun at parties. But I was more of a Rocksmith fan because I'm a musician.
Is there any game elements as part of it, or is it more of just like an app?
No, this one seems like an expansion of what the game was, where there's way more things to learn, probably goes more in depth than what was released 10 years ago. But the game element very much is like Guitar Hero. But like I said, taking it very easy one time where you're just holding on one string when you're starting off at a time, eventually two, and eventually it starts making you like learn chords in the fact that like you're going to be holding down like, A, E, D, G, so like it starts taking you through the whole thing. And like I said, if it's noticing you're struggling, it peels it back slowly, and then eventually it'll just slowly raise you back up. It never overwhelms you, which is a great thing, because I think that's one frustration thing can happen about learning music is you're gonna have to repeat a lot before it becomes good. Where I think this approach is much easier for me to learn system, where just taking it slow, one thing at a time, as opposed to trying to do everything at once and then practicing for hours and hours and hours before it feels good. It's probably a much better approach for any beginner to learning music. I didn't see bass as an option. I believe the other ones have bass as an option. I could be wrong. It's been quite a while since I played my Rocksmith, and I still haven't in my instruments. But I digress. I'm glad to see it's back. Hopefully it gets ported to consoles because, like I said, it's good. I just want more tracks. Give me more, and don't hide it behind a so much DLC. I mean, I understand music, but
it's gonna be a monthly subscription though, is what I read.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's like an ongoing service thing, unfortunately.
That's unfortunate.
But it does allow you to use acoustic guitar. So they said something about how your cell phone becomes the microphone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that then syncs to the PC or if the entire thing can be done in the app. I'm not really sure there, but that's
I thought it was just being used as a tuner. So that's unfortunate. Anyways. Everhood, Dean, on your list.
Everhood. Yeah. Speaking of guitars, this game just looks cool, man. I was a huge fan of Undertale. This is a completely different developer, but clearly takes inspiration from the quirkiness that we saw in Undertale. And there's just so much. Like right now, you're sort of jumping around on a guitar fret chord, whatever you call it in musical terms, but now you're like racing down an old highway. Here's like a shooter portion of it, so there's a lot of different gaming elements that are part of the story. Here's more of a RPG, dungeon crawling. So if you guys have played Undertale, this just gave me some
it does
crazy Undertale vibes. And I don't know, if you're playing this trailer with music, it's got a great soundtrack. Looks like a lot of fun characters. I don't know. I'm just excited about it. Full admission, I had to scrape a little bit to find, the 9th and 10th games to talk about at E3 because, but it does look cool.
Maybe next year when they have 500 games, you'll find some.
That's right.
Caleb.
Yeah, Chivalry 2.
Where was Chivalry 1 stack up on your list?
No, I never played Chivalry 1. And to be honest, I probably won't play Chivalry 2, but there's a reason I bring it up here. So it's a multiplayer PC focused game set in medieval times. None of those things tick any of my boxes. But the reason why I was excited to talk about this game, and it wasn't until I was recently listening to the Bombcast, or the Giant Bomb podcast, Bombcast, and Danny O'Dwyer is now a person on that panel, and I love Danny O'Dwyer, so I really started paying more attention to the Bombcast once he got on, and he was talking about this game recently. It was originally announced, I think, in E3 2019, and I think either there's a demo online or the full game is already online. I can't remember, but he was talking about he was playing it, and all of the people on the panel had the exact same question that probably everyone had when they were watching this trailer, and that's, what tone is this game? Like, what is it? Is it a sim, or like, is it supposed to be like an authentic thing, like I don't know, that one, I don't know, the game that came out a couple of years ago that's like super hyper realistic medieval thing, is it something like that? Is it what is it? Because the music in the trailer is like butt rock, like, and then the thing that you just see, like what looks to be like something that's trying to take itself kind of seriously. And so everyone's like, what is going on with this? And Danny O'Dwyer said, basically he explained it in a lot of different ways, but it came down to, it's absolute nonsense of a game. It's absolute chaos nonsense. It's more fun than it is anything else. There's a ton of players all at once. You all each have these different missions. Most of the fights end up being like, they're kind of melee, but they're a little bit sort of they're a little bit sort of rubber ragdoll-y and kind of hard to really kind of wrestle with. Not quite to the level like a Gang Beasts, but there's some level of like, you can get good at it, but most people probably won't be. And he said something about, it like, there's all these different like kind of mini missions. Like basically the idea is you just battle, like you have two warring factions and you go and you kind of battle them, and they're usually hand-to-hand combat, and you just kind of try to kill the whole rest of the team. But there's also these like mini missions that'll kind of pop up on your screen, and it'll say things like go burn down this building or whatever, or go do this. And keep in mind, there's like 64, I think, players all at once. So it's already pretty chaotic. But then he mentioned something about how like one of the tasks will be like, go kill the Duke. And the Duke, I think, is one of the players, like one of the actual, like a player can be the Duke. And so within a turn of a corner, 63 players are now like, let's kill that guy. And like, and it's just nonsense on toast. And I was like, man, this sounds like really, really fun. Like, it sounds like it would be a super fun game. My computer's not strong enough to handle it. I'll watch some stuff online about it, but I wanted people who may be interested or may not have known what it is and maybe feel like that could be kind of fun. I just want people to know about it, because it seems like a game that people should know about, because if it's your kind of game, you'll be all over it, but you might just not know it's your kind of game. So that's the main reason I wanted to bring it up. It just looks super fun.
One of the big hitters from Summer Game Festival, this is Jeff Keighley's, this is the thing he got his show all lined up for. And he finally had something for what it was, and it was Elden Ring, which, I mean, I heard people talking all about this one, saying, will we finally get this game? Will we finally get this game? Well, they finally showed it off. I don't know if it's supposed to come out January, right, of 2022 is when they're estimating it's coming out. So
I think so.
Yeah, beginning of 2022, yeah.
So very much a Souls-looking game. George R.R. Martin's attached to it, so I wonder... No, I haven't played. The only Souls game I've really truly played is Bloodborne, and that game was mostly lore. There's a story, but there's a lot of lore where you have to read the notes and read everything, and I'm dumb, so I always have to like. It's great having Church host the Cartridge Club for that episode, and you hear more about the lore of the game, and people who are big fans, they'll explain it to you. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I just wish someone would have told me in the game. It's me having to be a big dum-dum and have to go find notes and read that stuff. But so I'm hoping that's what this game is. I hope there's more of that, especially with George R.R. Martin attached to it, that story is very much a part as opposed to just getting your ass owned. Because once there's a reason for me to do something, I'm more than willing to put up with a lot of pain. I don't quit a game very easily, even if it's really tough. I'm willing to put up with a lot of pain if you keep dangling that carrot in front of me. So that's what I hope this is. I know there's a lot of people hyped for it, and I figure I should bring it up because this was the big star of the show on Thursday. So
yeah, this is one I haven't particularly been super hyped about. But I know a lot of people have. I'm just curious to what extent George R.R. Martin is even a part of this. And I've only read a handful of the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire books, but I find that his strength is very much in uh, character
sex?
building. Well, no, I think just but
Murder?
I think just the nobody's safe aspect, but also just having an interesting and not so tropey character arcs for the characters. They'll have missions or determinations or goals that they never reach because they are just killed off, and you just have to sort of accept that. And he sort of pulls away from filling his books with fantasy creatures, and he alludes to them, sure, the White Walkers and the giant spiders and the giants, but you really don't see a lot of them, certainly south of the Wall. And when I look at this trailer, all it is just one protagonist against a world of monsters with not a lot of happening in that world. It's just everything is death and rot. I'm just wondering, like, where are his strengths shining through? Because he's not a monster designer. He's not what has he built, I guess, other than just putting his name on the cover and saying, hey, remember this guy?
True that. Very much like Ender Lilies. Right?
Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys caught this game. This was part of the run of 300 or 400 games that were shown at the Indie Live Expo. So completely slipped under my radar. It's already out in early access, but it looks really cool. It's got some massive Ori vibes to it. And it just caught my eye as sort of unique, which is weird because the entire time I was just comparing it to other games that I've played. It has a lot of skill based, Dark Soulsy, Hollow Knight style combat, but it's also got sort of a vanillaware aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's got, I don't know if you guys have played any of the arcade distillery games like Plague Road, but definitely a lot of sort of those animations where arms and legs are sort of pivoting almost like marionettes. Child of Light.
Bone animation, I think they call that.
What is it called?
Bone animation.
Bone animation?
Basically,
okay.
Bones are on swivels, and that's kind of
what
it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Ori music and just like the Ori skill tree, you can unlock different abilities for your different familiars that you can use in combat. And it's dark, but it looks like a game that I'd really be into. So,
that does look cool. It looks like I think, or visually, it kind of looks a little bit like, I think the game was Child of Light.
Child of Light, yeah.
Yeah, and now mechanically in gameplay, it looks completely different, but yeah.
Yeah, you can see all the familiars she's summoning here. There's like a dozen of them that we just see in this trailer, and they're all pretty different in the way they combat. And then earlier on, you could see each of them has their own skill trees that have multiple levels for each skill, and it just seems like a really elaborate game, or a game with a lot of depth to it for an indie title. So excited to try it out.
You know what? I know what a game that Caleb's excited to try out.
Yeah, I could.
Chicory.
Chicory. Yeah. Chicory.
Yeah.
Colorful Tale. This is another one that really was put on my radar through the Giant Bombcast. I had missed it, didn't see it at all but they started talking about it, and it really, really seemed interesting because when the guy and pardon me, I can't remember the person's name who brought it up, but when he brought it up, the collective sigh in the room, I mean, it was audible. They were like, "What? This game looked pretty lame." And he's like, yeah, it looks lame. But the way he described it was that it has such a deep emotional kind of register, especially for people who create content. Like it really sort of forces you to question the nature of creating content and what does that mean to create content? What does that mean to create? And what does it mean when, who's really paying attention to the content, who's really watching it, who's really listening to it, reading it, whatever it is. And so there's this really sort of strong through line through that really happened to grab this particular person because obviously on the Giant Bombcast, he makes content, but outside of that, the whole idea of the game is you're just a dog with a paintbrush and you have to go across the land filling in the color. And it can be played as simply as that. You could give it to a 3-year-old. You could make some adjustments in the accessibility options so that there's no like combat, and they could just go throughout the world coloring things in. Or you could just play it as it's in normal mode or whatever. And there's a few boss fights, but it's sort of a Zelda game where you do tasks for people. You fight bosses, that sort of thing. But then at the same time, you're just kind of coloring in the world. And I don't know. It just, the way that he spoke about it was like, this seems like a really, really cool game. And it's already out. I actually was just about to purchase it earlier today so that I could play a little bit of it before this podcast, but then I decided to take a nap instead. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'll probably actually play it this weekend. I'll pick it up and play it this weekend on PS4. I think it's on PS4. So yeah, I was just really excited about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's our 10, everybody. Each one of us selected 10. So yeah, like I mentioned this earlier, and I think Dean alluded to it too. It's like where do we see 2021 ending with these games? Like, what do you think at the end of the day, 2021, with how some of these games are up in the air? What do you think the game of the year will be? A couple of nominations. Just give me a couple. I'll start off with 2 that I think will probably be shoe-in candidates for it. Both the games I've not played yet, but I imagine Returnal is probably going to be one. I mean, I remember everyone already talking when Returnal came out, even though it definitely doesn't seem like it's a game in my wheelhouse. But there's a lot of talk, and I just get the Sekiro vibes from it, where the fact that where people, I don't say where people were all saying, oh, this is the game, this is the game, this is the game, this is the game. And Sekiro just slipped in there because, I don't know, there was, when Returnal came out, there was a lot of people saying, this guy already got Game of the Year vibes. It's early in the year, but it's got Game of the Year vibes all over this one here. Now, it's quiet now, but it's also been kind of quiet with releases, with the exception of maybe Resident Evil 8 coming out and getting a lot of memes and whatnot. Great time. I had a great time with Resident Evil 8. I don't know if that's Game of the Year material. I had a great time with it. It's definitely in my wheelhouse. Love Nier remake, but I don't know because it's a game from 2011 that's remade, where I don't know if that's going to do it. Returnal's my guess, and I'm going to say Horizon. If it releases this fall, I think that might be the shoe-in because it didn't win with Breath of the Wild. I don't think it'll win if Breath of the Wild 2 comes out that same year. So I think if it's got no competition, probably Horizon is probably, if not for sure, a candidate. If not, maybe the winner. One of those 2 are the 2 I think more likely are going to be in the top 2.
I would say Halo has a shot. Halo Infinite as being Game of the Year, just because of the hype surrounding it. Everybody's going to be picking it up. I don't know if it'll come out too late because the Game Awards usually cut off in November.
I think it was the first week in December, maybe this last. Okay. I can't remember. I can't remember when. You can find out when Jedi Fallen Order came out because I think it got released the week after. Like their cutoff. So yeah, and people were complaining about that.
Like if Horizon makes it, because when was the first Horizon? 2017, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my Game of the Year. I don't know. Maybe Far Cry 6 has a chance. I don't know. I just can't think of any that are getting, like, all of the heavy hitters that are hitting this year. Resident Evil Village, Biomutant, and all these games that I thought would do really well are sort of getting better than lukewarm reception, but they're not getting 10s, right? I don't think there's been a 10 that's been given out this year.
Returnal's the one I think got like the highest review, where it's like a 9 point something. It's not like a 9.5, but it's like a 9.1 or like whatever on Metacritic.
Right, right. What's that other one coming out from that? Deathloop. Deathloop has a bit of hype around it too. I know it's got pushed a bunch of times. I don't think it's Game of the Year quality, but it'll be interesting to see where that lands in terms of reception.
Caleb, if you're not muted.
There we go. Sorry. Of Dean's list here, there's 179 games that come out in 2021. Of those, and these were the ones that were just at the show, Of those, I've played probably 0 of them. So all of mine are the only 2 games I've played in 2021 are Maquette and It Takes Two, which neither one of those would be Game of the Year. I loved them both, especially It Takes Two, but not Game of the Year material. So I think everything is just based off of like hype and what I know the studios themselves can do. And I think Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon 2 is the only one that I know of that should be coming out this year and that is going to be backed by that much, by the kind of talent that I would expect. I just can't think of any other, and they're always going to be big titles. Like there's never a tiny game that wins Game of the Year. So it would be a game that we would know about. And so, yeah, Horizon's the only one I can really think of.
Yeah, it's just a shame. But the thing is, it's so hard with this year, with what it is. So it could be a gamble. You could have the giant vampire lady from Resident Evil 8. I just don't see it. It was a good game. I agree with the reviews. That's like an 8.5 for Resident Evil. It's not like, I think 7 was much more revolutionary than 8. 8 just kind of 8 took a lot of what Resident Evil games that are great. It takes elements from 2, 4, 7, and just mashes them all together. And they say, here you go, here's a game. And it's very fun. So if you're a fan of the Resident Evil series, play Resident Evil 8. You're going to have a good time with it. But I agree with that 8.5 score with it. Maybe with how this year is, maybe it was because I think 7 was nominated just to win Game of the Year that year. So, but yeah, we'll see. There's probably more still to be announced this year. We're just still waiting to see if games are going to release in the fall. But with that being said, we covered a lot of games today, Tuesday, yesterday, and Sunday. So if you want to check out this channel, the YouTube channel, give it a like, thumbs up, whatever. But with that being said, let me plug my guests and we'll say goodnight. So Dean, where can we find you online?
Yeah, find me at Round 2 Gaming on Twitter, on Instagram, in the Cartridge Club Discord, and various other video gaming Discords. And yeah, come by, say hi.
Thank you for helping out. Caleb, where can we find you? I see you pointing to something.
Yeah, you can find me here.
I can't read. What is that?
You can find me there, youtube.com/Caleb J. Ross, and also on Twitter, Caleb J. Ross.
Thanks for helping out. Thanks for helping me put this list together, guys. And we'll see you guys next time. See you tonight.